Hopefully this phone will hang on.
Oh, over there. We get through like we all be. It's honor to have on the one and only brother Albert Lanier. He is a freelance journalist, an investigative journalist, a critical thinker, a free thinker, and a person that I'm looking forward to hearing more from because I've been checking out some of his latest media rounds, and he's been dropping some heavy gems. Some of y'all might not be able to pick them up. You might need a group to help you pick it up, but hopefully you can pick up some gems or something from what he's saying out here. How you doing today, sir?
How are you, Ron? I'm doing
I'm
fine. I like
there.
that. Critical thinker and independent thinker.
Yeah, so tell us.
I've been an independent journalist all my life and retired 4 years, coming back to freelancing. So part of why I'm here is I'm on a media tour, so doing different shows, and that's how you partly heard about me because you saw some of the shows I was on recently. I just did a show this past Tuesday with attorney Gavin Richard, who's a friend of yours, and it was very interesting. It was a great conversation, and then I was on the Judge Joe Brown show last week.
I actually
don't. You know the judge. Yeah, you know the judge, of course. You interview him a great deal. People can go and see his interviews. That's how I became acquainted with you, because I was looking up different episodes of his radio show, and I was like, oh, this guy Ron Hurd has done interviews with him. I gotta check this guy out. So it was really good. Now,
I appreciate it.
I have to admit, well, thank you. Yeah. So you have an interesting background, because you're an artist and you're a musician and play the trumpet. I'm sure the ladies love that, right?
Well, that's another story. That's another show.
That's another show. I'm sorry.
Theoretically, you would think it would be the case, but but everybody, every dog has his day, But it's interesting. I know you reached out to me over a year ago, and I know you've been very tenacious. I know you're a great journalist because you got a lot of tenacity. You don't give up, and you stick to your guns. So. Yeah, once I started checking you out, man, I said, this guy is on the ball here. Yeah, but I really respect you and what you're doing. Yeah, I mean, because a lot of people reach out to me.
Thank you.
And it's hard, man. I'm a one-man show, actually. People think I got a staff of researchers and stuff like that. And I got my own little problem. I'm just thanking God right now. I'm not an alcoholic or a drug addict right now. I'm trying to just keep it all together, but let's tell us, a little bit about your background. But tell us a little bit about your background. Set us up for us. Like, who is Albert Lanier?
Well, Albert Lanier is a formerly retired freelance journalist and freelance writer. I was a freelance journalist and writer for 22 years, from about 1994, with an exception of, I quit the business briefly in 2004. About 4 months. And then came back 2005, and then worked in the business until about 2017, February, where I retired. And I wrote for magazines, I wrote for newspapers. I worked as a journalist and writer in Honolulu mostly, which is where I am right now. And also in L.A. I lived in L.A. twice, worked there, lived there, and then in Seattle. And strangely enough, on the island of Molokai here, I was on a newspaper on the island of Molokai, which is what brought me back to Hawaii back in 2008. So I was on a newspaper called the Molokai Dispatch as a staff writer for a brief time. I call that my Northern Exposure experience. If people remember the TV show Northern Exposure. So I've done, like I said, I was a freelance journalist for over 20 years. Before that, born and raised in Hawaii, and I attended a liberal arts college called the University of Hawaii, West Oahu, where I graduated with my Bachelor of Arts degree in the humanities in 1993. I think it was May 1993. So originally, I got a degree. It's kind of an interesting school. I went back in 2018. Actually, I went back twice. In 2014, I went back to see, they built a brand new campus for the school. So they built this brand new modern campus. This was a tiny school when I went there. They built this brand new campus for the school. I went back to let me see. I did a Q&A session with a journalism class there, and then I did one of my seminars. There are about 3 seminars I give, can give, and have given, called the Basics series. The Basics is what I call the 3 rules of writing. Second is what I call the Goods, which is about freelance writing. And the third is called the Business of Writing, which is a follow-up to the original one, the Goods. The Basics. So that's seminars. I can give that to groups and organizations, but I haven't had reason to. So I gave the Basics, that seminar, to a creative writing class there in 2014. Then I came back in 2018 and I gave a lecture. It was interesting. I was a Constitution Day speaker in 2018. I don't know if you're familiar with Constitution Day. Ron?
Tell us about Constitution Day. Can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Yeah, tell us about it. Enlighten us about Constitution Day.
Okay. Constitution Day is it's a actual day set aside. It's not an official holiday because you don't get it off, but it's a day set aside to honor the Constitution. And apparently, my understanding is that institutions that get government funding have to do one of 2 things. They have to either have a display that shows that it's something about the Constitution, or they have to have a speaker or some program about it. And I guess I fulfilled that mandate for the school because I was invited. I was looking to come back, and I got invited by the Law Society Club there at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu. And I came back in 2018 to give a lecture entitled Free Speech and Fake News, The Crisis of Journalism in the 21st Century. And so that was nice. I gave that at the Student Services Center at UH West Oahu. That was 2018. So I've been back to my alma mater twice, one in 2014, one in 2018. And I gave the lecture in 2018. So it's about the only time I've given a college lecture. I'd like to do more of it, but unfortunately with the pandemic, it's unlikely that I'll do it in person unless something changes. Although I could do it over StreamYard or Zoom, what have you. So that's a possibility. And so, like I said, I've been a freelance journalist and writer 22 years, retired in 1994, basically in 2017, retired in 2017, had 4 years of retirement. I was writing a blog during my retirement, which is on Medium. If people want to read it, it's medium.com/@thedoctor50. That's medium.com/@thedoctor50. That's my blog. My blog is on media and on current events, current news, current events. I've been doing that for over 3 years now, and just got back because of the pandemic. And I want to move, and because I want to move, I'm here in Hawaii currently, but I want to move. I've come back to freelancing, and as a part of my return to freelancing, I'm engaged in a media tour. So I've been on talk shows and podcasts and programs. So this is the media tour that I'm on. I'm in the second leg right now. I just did a show, like I said, this past Tuesday. I think it was Random Topics with Gavin Richards, who's an attorney in New Orleans, who you know. Yeah. And previous to that, I'd been on the Judge Joe Brown show. I'm sure people out there know Judge Joe Brown. So I did his radio show. That was interesting. And I did a show before that called The Ocelli Effect. I was talking about, let me see. I was talking about Sam Cooke. So I've been kind of busy. I've been going from one booking to another. So I've been quite busy. But I'm here promoting my return to freelance writing, trying to line up projects, trying to line up gigs, trying to write up work, writing gigs, writing projects, writing work. So, and I don't know. I'm new to promotion and marketing because I knew when I came back, everything's changed. You got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We never had that in the 90s when I started. In 1990s, never had that. So it's all brand new to me. I mean, in that sense, I never had to market and promote myself. So
Okay, yeah.
this is promoting. I'm kind of learning to do it because it's all stuff I never had to do. So we'll see whether it works or not. I don't know, but we'll see. I'm just being as honest as I can be because I'm not a marketer. I'm not a promoter. I'm just a writer. So
Yeah,
I did write ad copy. Go ahead.
But the storytelling and the person who controls the narrative controls the minds and influences the masses in terms of like who's controlling the narrative. So you got a very important job, although it may be unsung, it's very important. So I got to ask you, since you live in Los Angeles for 2 times in your life, will you ever try and pursue like screenwriting in Hollywood by any chance?
It's funny you mentioned that. The weird part, when I was there in 1996, the weird part about living in LA for me was that I was a writer. I was writing for publications, struggling writer, but trying to get as much freelance work as I could. And I had absolutely no interest, though I was a film reviewer at one point. I wrote film reviews for a website called ain'titcool.com or Ain't It Cool News, which is the name of the website. And I did that 2002 to 2010. I was doing film festivals here in Hawaii. But when it comes to film, so I'm interested in film and love films, of course, but I had no interest in being a screenwriter. I did years ago have an interest in being a filmmaker. But by the time I became a freelancer and a writer, when I came out of college, my only interest was in being a novelist and short story writer. And I never did that because I wound up being a freelancer. So when it came to screenwriting in LA, the weird part was like every Tom, Dick, and Harry was telling me, "Are you writing a script? You got any scripts?" And they said, "I'm a writer." "Oh, you write scripts?" "No, I write articles." "You should write scripts." And so you're getting people telling you this from time to time, and it bugged me. I was just irritated. It just was like, look, and I didn't want to be rude, but I'm like, is there anybody here in Los Angeles who isn't a screenwriter, who doesn't try to write for TV? I mean, seriously, come on now. But that's what I got from people. I'm not talking, if someone in the industry had come to me, if I met him somewhere and he said, "Are you a writer? Do you write scripts?" You might want to think about that. Then I might have tried to dust off, get some more paper at the time and write some scripts. I would have tried to do it then.
Yeah, I think
but I had no interest in it. Yeah, I was getting it from people. It's hard for people to believe. LA is a whole other city because you're there in Memphis, right? Memphis, Tennessee.
Yes.
You see, no one's bothering you there in Memphis. Like, no one in Memphis would say, "Are you writing screenplays? Are you writing for TV shows? You should do that." Maybe if you're in a place like Atlanta, Georgia, because Georgia has a lot of TV and film production, or Louisiana, another hub for film production. Maybe New York. If it's New York City and LA, yes. Maybe in some of these others, Louisiana, Georgia. But outside of that, nobody cares about scripts. Nobody cares if you're writing for a screen. That was the weird part about LA. It's like everybody's uncle was like, "You're a writer. Are you writing scripts? You need to be writing scripts. Come on.
Is it more
writing scripts?"
But is it more about LA? Is the misconception of the perception of LA? Like, you was living in West Hollywood, and Los Angeles is not all Hollywood. It's not considered all Hollywood.
That's right.
So you was actually in West Hollywood, and people were acting it, like, correct?
Well, yeah, West Hollywood. Well, LA in general. I mean, LA is different from California, other parts of California.
Yeah.
I've been to San Francisco, great city, very different from LA, very different. You go to San Diego. I've never been to San Diego, but San Diego is very different, very conservative, lots of military bases, a lot of institutions, very different city. So LA is different, I would say, from California in general. and from the rest of the country in certain respects. But what people get is the illusion of LA. They get the images from LA. They don't get the real LA. So they don't have an understanding of the fact so they don't understand it. And I wasn't in LA for a long time, unfortunately. I hope to go back one of these days. I want to go back to California. But the real LA is very different from the illusion, the image you get. That's an illusion. It's Hollywood and celebrities and all of that stuff. And LA is different. I would say LA very different from other towns. That's very true. But I didn't find LA. I found people in LA, for example, pretty nice at times. They weren't terrible. This idea that it's cutthroat. I mean, yeah, I'm sure if you're in the industry, like if you're an actor or a producer or a writer, you're going to have a degree of that. But I found everyday people in LA pretty nice, pleasant, easy to get along with at times. Again, it's the illusion. Now, I'm not saying everyone is, but you have a lot of transplants, right? You have a lot of people from other parts of the country. So, but LA for me, at least the first time I went there in the 90s was, as a writer, was people telling me, why aren't you writing scripts? And I just got tired of that. But when I went back in 2008, it wasn't that. I didn't have that problem. Not that it was a problem. It was just different.
Well, it's interesting compared to times when you went there back in 96. This is after the O.J. Simpson trial. This is after the Rodney King riots. And then you go back there in 2008, around the time Barack Obama rising his ascension into power, becoming president.
He was running for office.
So it's a lot of interesting story, but like also with LA is a breeding ground for true crime stories. Like you look at March March the 9th, we lost Notorious B.I.G. in LA. We lost Nipsey Hussle at the end of the month of 2019 in LA. And we also lost the one and only Sam Cooke in LA back in 1964. So to live and die in LA, like that Tupac song, is an interesting place to be.
I like the movie, like the book in the movie, Years in the 80s. To live and die in LA.
Yeah, and then also LA Confidential, the movie. That's a great one of my favorite movies of all time.
Well, but when I was on the Judge Joe Brown show this past Friday, he was saying LA Confidential was pretty accurate in regards to the times. I think it was set in the 50s.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and he grew up. Judge Joe Brown grew up in LA, and he said LA Confidential was pretty accurate. It's pretty on target.
Yeah, I got to say that I just saw Bugsy for the several time with Warren Beatty. I still think he was 10 years too old to play Bugsy if he played him 10 years earlier. But you don't go to Hollywood for your historical accuracy; it's for entertainment value. That's right. But it sets the mood because they said Bugsy allegedly, when he was facing that murder trial for his killing one of his Murder Inc. compadres, Harry Greene Greenberg, he told the DA, give me my money back that I gave you for your campaign. Give my $30,000 back. And the DA gave him the money back, district attorney. And that's all. It's weird how that works. But I do want to talk to you because I think it's important. At the Sam Cooke story, like you are a journalist. You are actually an investigative journalist as far as I'm concerned. All the research you got to do. And I just want to get your take on the Sam Cooke situation. How do you see it? Because, back in that time, they ruled his homicide justifiable during the coroner's inquest. Look at the Me Too thing going on now. If Sam Cooke died today, he would be known as a villain. He would not be celebrated as an icon. He would be, a demagogue. He would be the Antichrist. But what's your take on the Sam Cooke thing?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. Let me just note that you're absolutely right. If he were, if that had occurred today, oh boy. His life would be total toast. His reputation would be totally trashed. It's interesting because what drew me to the Sam Cooke case, I had been interviewed in 2019, I think 2020 even, for a podcast called Parallax Views, where I had done an analysis of the death of Bob Crane, who was the star of Hogan's Heroes.
Oh yeah.
and another episode on Bonnie Lee Bakley, who was the wife of Robert Blake. So I did the assessment. Now, before that, I had no interest in true crime. I wasn't a true crime guy. I never even watched true crime podcasts. It wasn't until after I got interviewed that I started looking at some of these, and found out a lot of. You talk about L.A. being a center of a lot of true crime. Just a lot of cold cases throughout the country.
Yeah.
Murders and disappearances. It's scary how many cases go unsolved and how many people remain gone, vanished, disappeared. It's just disturbing. And the just when I think about it, just the number is just. And so I had again been interviewed for Parallax Views about those two cases, Bob Crane and the Bonnie Lee Bakley case. And in 2016, interestingly enough, technically I had started on the true crime thing with DB Cooper, the hijacker. I had been on a show called The Robert Christian Show in Seattle. And at that time, the FBI had closed their case on Cooper, which I thought was interesting. And I chose that show because I had been on the show before, his show. But that show was from Seattle. And Cooper had landed at SeaTac Airport because the flight that he was hijacking was from Portland to Seattle. So I chose that show deliberately to talk about Cooper. And so those were kind of the lead ups to give you my curriculum vitae, so to speak, of true crime. And so the movie One Night in Miami had come out recently, and Sam Cooke's one of the figures in that movie. And I thought, because I had been interested, I had gone to the library and saw a biography of Sam Cooke, and his death stood out. I thought, wait a minute, this guy's a singer, songwriter, producer, successful, and he's found in a sleazy motel, dead, gunshot. It didn't add up to me. And I kept that in the back of my mind. And so when this movie One Night in Miami had come out, and since I had analyzed other cases, I thought, I'll go talk about this. And that's why I've done it recently. And so that's why I talk about Sam Cooke. Now, getting into Sam Cooke. I never bought the story at the coroner's inquest. I don't see how anyone can buy that story. I just don't. It makes absolutely no sense. And it makes absolutely no sense because, first and foremost, if people aren't familiar with the story, basically what they found was justifiable homicide, of course. But basically, Sam Cooke was found at this Hotel Hacienda, I think it's in 92nd and Figueroa in South Central. And he was found dead of a gunshot in the office of the manager. And according to the official account, he had come there with a woman called Elisa Boyer. And according to Boyer, who testified at the inquest, she claimed that he was trying to rape her. So he grabbed her out of the car, at a Ferrari, brought her in, according to her, brought her into the hotel room, taking her dress off, taking her sweater off. And at some point, she went to the bathroom. Said she couldn't get out. Then she came out, he's naked. So he ends up going in the bathroom at some point. And so she grabs his clothes and her clothes and gets out of there. And supposedly knocks on the door of the hotel manager, who's a woman by name Bertha Franklin. She supposedly didn't respond. So she goes about a block or so from there, puts her clothes on, and I guess hides Cooke's clothes, or at least one account says that. One aspect says that. Excuse me. And there's Sam. And so then she went to a phone booth after she got her clothes on, ran a phone booth, phoned the cops. And supposedly Sam sees she's gone and he's clad only in a sport jacket and a shoe, goes to the office, and knocks on the door, demanding her. I think Franklin told her she's not there. Then supposedly Cook breaks the door down and attacks Franklin. I guess they scuffle. And then supposedly Franklin gets up, grabs a gun, and shoots Cook 3 times, one of which hits him. Cook supposedly said, "Lady, you shot me," after being shot, and then trying to make a move toward her. And she took a broom handle or broom and hit the handle over his head or his hands until he expired. And then the police at some point came, because it was the early morning hours of December 11, 1964.
Mm-hmm.
And so the police came and found Sam Cooke. And so that was basically the official story. And I look at the so-called account because Elisa Boyer and Bertha Franklin testified at the inquest, as did a woman called, I believe her name was Evelyn Farr, who was the manager of the hotel. And Farr was supposedly on the phone with Franklin while this scuffle was going on between Sam Cooke and Franklin. Now, we get to this case. So that's the official, or the outline of the official count, because Boyer had met Cooke at a restaurant called Martoni's earlier that evening. And the two had gone to a nightclub called PJ's and then headed to the hotel, just to set up the background of that. So I felt when I examined this and in doing my research that this official story made absolutely no sense. Let's begin with the premise of, because I think you have to start at the premise. In order to believe this, in my mind, concocted story, you have to believe that Sam Cooke, who was a successful singer, songwriter, and producer, who had a string of hits in the late 50s to early 60s, up until he died. Songs like "You Send Me," "Cupid," "Another Saturday Night,"
Right.
and had an album out that at that point in 1964 called Sam Cooke Live at the Copa. You're supposed to believe that this guy, who had wads of supposedly $1,000 to $5,000 he carried with him, this guy is going to go to a sleazy motel with a woman he just met at Martoni's, which was the restaurant he was at initially. He just meets Elisa Boyer at Martoni's. They go to BJ's, and he's going to take her to this hotel and then supposedly have his way with her. First of all, you have to believe that premise if you're going to believe the story. And I would argue that that premise makes absolutely no sense. Sam Cooke certainly was married at the time, his wife Barbara, but he had played the field. He was a guy who had affairs, and he was with different women. I think he had children by different women. Yeah. So let me get this straight. Not only that, but supposedly when he went to the hotel with Elisa Boyer, he signed in under his own name, Sam Cooke. So let me get this straight. Sam Cooke, who's a fairly famous singer, he's on shows like American Bandstand, because that was one of his last interviews with Dick Clark. He's on TV shows. He's a performer. He's fairly well known. He's going to go to a sleazy motel in South Central, at the time was called. It's called South LA now. But he's going to go to so Sam's fairly famous. He's going to go to a sleazy hotel in South Central, sign his own name on the registry book, and then grab a woman he barely knows and put her in a hotel room and try to rape her.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. That premise doesn't add up. In order for it to add up, you have to find other situations, or you have to be aware of similar such situations with Sam. To my knowledge, and again, if someone can find similar situations, I invite them to. But from what I've seen, that was not Sam's modus operandi. That wasn't the way he conducted himself. It just wasn't what he did. So it made absolutely no sense to me that he did this. Oh, you can't. So that premise right there, I don't buy, because I don't see any evidence to support it. So if that doesn't work, you then start looking at the other details. And what are the other details, right? That he would take this woman. So you have to look at both women. Elisa Boyer was 22 at the time, and Bertha Franklin was about in her 50s at the time. Right. She was 55 or in her 50s. Now, Elisa Boyer got arrested a month later after this death in December of 1964. She got arrested for basically solicitation or having to do with prostitution. She called up an undercover cop and was trying to arrange a date for $40. So we know she was involved to some extent with prostitution, right? The line on her was that she would go and rob guys, like set up dates and then rob Johns, rob them of money. And that's what she would do. So that was what Elisa Boyer would do. Then we have Bertha Franklin. Bertha Franklin was an ex-madam, meaning that she would run what would be popularly known as a whorehouse or a bordello or some house of ill repute, as the phrase would go, house of prostitution. So that was her background. And she was managing this hotel hacienda, which was known to be kind of a hub for prostitutes and I think pimps and Johns probably. And from what I've heard, also a place where musicians would also conduct their hookups and their little one-night stands to a certain extent. That's the word that I've heard on that. So you have these two characters involved in the story. In fact, Elisa Boyer's story is the story in regards to Sam Cooke. Right. There's no other story, right? Because she supposedly was with him, certainly at the restaurant, Martoni, but supposedly they were at PJ's, and then they were at the hotel. So from PJ's, which was, I guess, when they went there was about 1 a.m. or so, till about when he was found, which was, I guess, 3 a.m. or after 3 a.m., early morning hours. You got to look at that window in regards to Sam Cooke. So if you don't buy the premise that Sam Cooke took this woman to this hotel to have her against her will to rape her, if you don't buy that premise, and you don't buy that this guy would sign his name because he was a known ladies' man, and clearly somebody he would know modesty, and he was also a recording artist with a big career. You have to consider that. You have to go, Sam Cooke cared about his career as a singer, songwriter, and producer, very involved musically in the music business. He had his own record labels, SAR and Derby. He had his own management company. He had his own publishing, meaning songwriting and songwrites. He was and he wanted to control his music and was very involved in that. Which Sam Cooke had jeopardized his career to take a woman he just met, supposedly, to a hotel and then, jump her bones because he felt like it. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Even if again, the other thing I would say about that is I look at habits and behavior of victims. If I deal with true crime, habit and behavior of the victim. What were the habits? What was the behavior of the victim? If the habit of the victim was not, in this case, in Sam's case, to be involved in, if he wasn't someone who people knew were doing this. Now, of course, they wouldn't necessarily know. If he was going around doing this sort of thing, they wouldn't necessarily know, but there might be talk. There might be talk about this, right?
Right.
There's always your image. Sam Cooke had a clean-cut, polished image, but it's like anything in Hollywood. There's the image you put forth and the reality behind the image. But I see nothing that suggests to me, no incidents that I'm aware of, no anecdotes I'm aware of, that Sam Cooke was a violent person, or that he was involved in violence against women. So we go to another aspect, the fact that this guy was admittedly drunk. I mean, his blood alcohol level was, I think, 0.16 or 0.16, which was above the legal limit. So this guy is going to go and wander around basically naked except for a jacket on and a shoe on, and tear down a hotel manager's office door to attack this manager. Again, I don't see any anecdotes. I don't know of any anecdotes, any incidents, any crime reports that I'm aware, that I've heard of, that I've come into contact with, that indicate that Sam Cooke was involved in this kind of activity. So again, I think it should be questioned. I question that he tore the door down, and I question that he attacked Bertha Franklin. Then you get to what happened inside the office. The fact that Franklin stated in her inquest that he was close, meaning Cooke, and that she took her gun and shot him 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's be very honest here. Let's get very logical here. The shot that supposedly killed Sam Cooke hit his left lung, went from an upward angle below the armpit, hit the left lung, hit the heart, came out the right lung, and then came out of the body.
Mm.
Now, that's a precise shot. You mean to tell me that this woman shot 3 times, stated he was close, meaning close range, missed twice, and then had a kill shot that was precise after missing twice? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't add up. Not only that, but here's another thing. If you look at a crime scene photo, that's the one you normally see in documentaries about Sam Cooke, you normally see this one, right? He's slumped near the door, and if you notice that photo, what do you notice about Sam Cooke? There's no bullet hole in his head, none in his face, none in the center of his chest, like sternum, none near his stomach. There was one shot reportedly that hit Sam Cooke. That was below the armpit, through the lung, through the heart. It's a precise shot. So what I also ask is, if Bertha Franklin had got up, they're on the floor. Let's assume they're on the floor. They're fighting. She gets up, goes for a gun, and aims at him. She's going to shoot below the armpit, to the left lung, in a shot that goes out the right lung. From what angle is she shooting? From what angle is she shooting? She didn't try to shoot his head. She didn't try to shoot his heart directly, or the center of his chest. There is the, just look at, if you can look at it, look, you can't see any blood on his stomach or the upper part of his body, at least from that, because he's got a jacket on.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see anything in it. You don't see any headshot. I'm going, why would you go for a precise shot if you're terrified of this man, if you're afraid of him? Why would you go for a shot that would have to be done from a certain angle? I don't know. If you were to believe the story, I would assume that Sam would have to be at a certain, he wouldn't be facing her directly. She would have to be at a certain angle to shoot at the armpit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can't be facing front, because that would make sense. So the fact there was no headshot, no direct shot to the heart, no shot to the stomach, no shot to the chest, obvious shots if he's facing her, if he's on the floor. That says to me, there's no way she could have shot it. And I would say, well, where's the blood evidence? Where's the trace evidence? Where's the fiber? Even for 1964, where is the forensic evidence, ballistic evidence? Supposedly there was the bullet that had passed through Sam Cooke. I think that was taken into evidence, but I think it's missing. I believe it's missing. Where's the bullet? Where are the 2 bullets? She says she thought she shot 3 times. Where are the 3 bullets? Where are they? Where are they? We don't know where they are. We don't know. Does it make sense that someone who is terrified for her life is going to aim a precise shot after missing twice? Because apparently only one shot. And then there's this lady who shot me, which sounds like a line from a cheap melodrama. I mean, I've read cheap detective novels that have better plots than this. I mean, come on. You add that up. None of that. When you add this up, it makes no sense. You can't believe the story. And going back to Elisa Boyer, she said that he had gone into the bathroom. So this guy's going to drag her from the car, take her from the car, into the room, rip her clothes off, and then at some point say, oops, I got to go to the bathroom. Really? Kind of convenient, don't you think?
Well, Brother Albert, what do you think of the fact that during the coroner's inquest that Elisa and Bertha was wearing shades during the coroner's hiding their eyes?
Well, actually, Elisa Boyer and she was wearing shades. I think there's a picture of it right there. If you look at, let me see, I think that's at the left.
Yeah, that's Elisa Boyer, but she was wearing, I mean, you see footage. I'm talking about the actual film footage of her testifying. Right, that's what I'm saying. In court. I think they should have made her take those off. They said,
you see the woman there,
the soul, right?
Right. It's just, and Gavin pointed this out when I was on his show Tuesday. And I know this as well. Both ladies, both Elisa and Bertha, did not have attorneys at that inquest. And it was a coroner's inquest. It was not a full criminal trial. So you had a coroner's jury. But it was an inquest. And this occurred 5 days after. So it strikes me that this was wrapped up quickly. I mean, even for a celebrity, and Sam Cooke was celebrity. This was over and out rather quickly.
It was
neat and tidy, except it wasn't neat, and it certainly isn't tidy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to just add. Well, I just want to make sure I include what Etta James observed at the funeral. I mean, this should for posterity. I know Muhammad Ali was real close to Sam. He was signed to his record label. He didn't agree with the outcome of the inquest either. But I just want people to understand what Etta James saw. According to Etta James, she said that Sam's head was practically disconnected from his shoulders. His hands were broken and crushed. His nose was mangled. I could see massive bruises on his head. No woman with a broom could have inflicted that kind of beating. The Mickey must have worn off, and the guys trying to take him out must have started beating and shooting him, and they concocted this far out story that no reasonable person could believe. This is Etta James from her autobiography. She's talking Beyond the Grave, but nobody heard shots that night, correct? She shot him 3 times allegedly. There were no shots heard by people at the hotel or the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's reportedly what that is the scuttlebutt. There were no shots heard by neighbors, or I think even people at the hotel. No reported. And notice what Etta James said there. Concocted, what I mentioned before, concocted story. No reasonable person could believe. Very important. That she is described to a T, the summary of my assessment. No reasonable person could, at least my assessment of the official account, no reasonable person can believe this. No reasonable person can buy this. It's not feasible. It's not possible. There's no way, even on the surface. And I hate to make this comparison, but I'm going to.
Right.
If you look at JFK assassination, if you look at MLK assassination, if you look at RFK, meaning John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and Robert F. Kennedy, if you look at the convicted murderers, in 2 of the cases convicted, in 1 it isn't, but in the people that are said to have been the murderers of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King, when you look at the official account, you at least have these individuals tied to there's at least the believability factor. And this may be controversial for those who are into conspiracies and question the account, but there is at least a minor thread, a patina of believability. After all, Lee Harvey Oswald was working at the school book depository.
Mm-hmm.
He was there and he left. You had Sirhan Sirhan, who was in the pantry of the Ambassador Motel or Hotel in Los Angeles when Robert Kennedy was shot in 1968. And we know that James Earl Ray was living in a boarding house across from the Lorraine Motel when Martin Luther King was. So we have those individuals are at least tied to location. And so you can extrapolate from, okay, they're in the environment, they're in the location, they had means, and you can extrapolate, you can say, you can guess what the motive might be from that point. But at least you have a patina of plausibility in stating that these individuals are tied to the assassinations. You don't have even a patina of believability in this case. Is it believable that a woman like Bertha Franklin is going to shoot someone in an office? I don't know how big the office is, but in an office 3 times, admittedly in close range, and shoot once and hit him once? Is it believable that a star like Sam Cooke is going to take a woman involved in prostitution to a sleazy motel and sign his name to a registry when he had an album out and he has a career to think about? Does that make any rational sense? There's no patina of believability here. There's no patina. Does it make sense that he's going to bring her into the room, take her clothes off, go in the bathroom, and go into a bathroom at some point?
What actually is Brother Albert? Is it possible that they were setting him up to damage his public image, and it got out of hand? Like the whole thing was to humiliate him and take pictures of him in a compromised position.
Right. I get what you mean. Oh yeah. That's not unusual. Those kind of tactics. Mm-hmm. I believe that it was a setup. Mm-hmm. From what I've seen in the evidence thus that I've looked at, and what I've looked at in this case, I believe it was a setup. Did it go out of hand? It's a possibility. I don't really believe so. I don't really think this was. I think something got out of hand. Something didn't go right. Mm-hmm. See, my overall assessment of this. Hold on just a minute.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
You good?
Had to. Sorry about that.
Are you good, man?
Okay. Hate to see that on camera, but my assessment is that this was a setup, and I believe 2 people were involved. I think one person was involved in recruiting Bertha Franklin and Elisa Boyer. I believe they were coerced. I believe they were forced into doing this. I don't think there was much of any reward for them. Elisa Boyer was found with $20 on her by police I think on that night, or reportedly anyway. So if she got paid for this, it didn't seem to do her very good because she got arrested for prostitution the following month. So that lends me to believe she didn't really get much out of this. The same with Bertha Franklin. Bertha Franklin basically got death threats against her for supposedly shooting Sam Cooke. And she wound up suing the estate of Sam Cooke. That didn't really work out for her. I don't really see a reward for any of these ladies. And of course, later on, Elisa Boyer ended up going to prison. I believe it was 2nd-degree murder in 1979. I think shooting her boyfriend.
Yeah, okay. Well, also, what about the thousands of dollars that Cooke was known to have on his person? Like he was known to carry wads of money. That never got recovered. So what happened to that money?
No, that's a good question. He had about $100 on him on his clip, the clip that he put money on in his jacket pocket. So in his jacket pocket, he had that clip. with $100. So he had some money on it. He still had some money on it. So
he was known for carrying thousands of dollars, though. They say he had
right.
thousands of dollars on him on his
somewhere
person.
between 1,000 and 5,000, I've heard.
Right.
He clearly had a wad on him that night. So let me get back. So I look at this and I go, okay, to put forth my thesis, I believe that there are two men involved. One, to coerce Elisa Boyer and Bertha Franklin to getting involved, because this is far too precise. It's too precise that Bertha Franklin is going to be the manager of this motel. And it's too precise that Elisa Boyer is going to be at Martoni's, conveniently there meeting Sam Cooke. There's nothing accidental about this. There's nothing incidental about this. This was planned. So you have one person who I think forced them into doing this. You got to do this, or maybe we'll rat you out to the cops, or maybe we'll ruin you in other ways. Then you have another individual who, if we believe Etta James's account, and I don't see any reason not to, either beat up Sam or probably beat up Sam and then shot him. So I believe it was at least a two-person job. You had one person that was involved with both of the ladies. They were involved in getting them and in the story, because the story is just a mishmash of nonsense. The details don't add up. That's why I know it's a lie. When you look at stories, people that are liars sometimes, the details, what you get are more details than you need, because it's the idea that somehow if you extrapolate more, that'll make it a more believable story. Does it make sense, for example, that she shot 3 times in a room like that, which I assume would be a modest room, shoot 3 times and only one shot hits him? One could argue it's possible, but I doubt it. And that shot that hit him was precise, under the armpit, hitting both lungs and hitting the heart. An exact shot, or as close to exact as possible.
Yeah, it's also worth pointing out that she was a alleged hooker, Elisa Boyer, but also Bertha Franklin was a madam, supposedly.
Right. She had, like I mentioned before, she had been a madam, and she was working at that motel. So you get a madam running a motel.
Yeah, a motel, whatever it is. But it's a very seedy place. It's not a family-oriented place. Yeah.
Right. There's nothing family-oriented about that. But
why would he sign his name in the guest book then? That's kind of weird. Right?
There you go. Now you know probably men of the world. I know guys who are do well with the ladies.
Right.
You can't be that stupid and do well with the ladies in terms of common sense and street smart. Sam was from Chicago, Bronzeville. Right. So you mean to tell me this guy was naive? I could believe he was from a suburban town or from the suburbs or something. If he'd stayed in Mississippi, which is where he was born, I don't buy that he's that naive. Like, okay, I'm going to sign my name to this book. You gotta. This is again 1964. It's not late 60s. This might as well be the late 50s. You had to. You got to understand, even today, in regards to the entertainment industry, you got to be very careful about your love life, your sex life, your life in general, your private life. You got to be very careful. Even now, you have to be careful. Even especially in this age of cameras everywhere, of cameras on your phone, cameras on your laptop, cameras on your PC, cameras in buildings, cameras in offices, cameras everywhere, surveillance everywhere. Computers that can pick everything up. You got to be careful. You got to be careful. And it just doesn't make sense to me. Just doesn't make sense that this guy is going to, you could argue he was drunk and he didn't. No, I don't buy it. If people have evidence to show otherwise, I'd be interested in hearing it. But the logic here, using logical examination, I take the scalpel of rationality and the scalpel of logic, and I cut through this. Cut through it. And this story just doesn't hold. It doesn't add up. The details are too over the top.
Well, you got to ask yourself the question, like it's very Shakespearean. Who benefits from the killing or the removal of the king? Who benefited the most from Sam Cooke's death, in your opinion, or your research?
Well, you have his manager, Alan Klein, who later went on to run a company called ABCO, ABCO Music. Alan Klein set up a holding company called Tracy Limited that for Sam Cooke, and Sam Cooke was on the board of directors. Of course, that changed, and Alan Klein, after Sam Cooke's death, ended up taking over the business, or taking over that company and incorporating it in 1970 or so into ABCO Music, which was his company. So that meant he got the rights to Sam Cooke's songwriting, his publishing, and to his probably to his recordings as well. There's no doubt in my mind Alan Klein knew something about the death of Sam Cooke.
And also his wife, Sam Widow. Yeah. But also Sam Widow sold the little bit Sam had in his publishing rights to Alan Klein for around $100,000 from my understanding.
Oh, you mean his widow, Barbara?
Yeah, Barbara. Yeah, she sold the last bit.
My understanding, I think, is that occurred. He got the rights by 1970. He got it because he incorporated into ABCO. ABCO controls Sam Cooke's music, and remember that Sam Cooke had a lot of hits: "Cupid," "Another Saturday Night," "You Send Me," sold over 1 million copies of it. "Having a Party," "Working on a Chain Gang." He was like a hit factory. That's what I call him. He was a hit factory. If this guy had been in the music business now, this guy would be bigger than Jay-Z, Kanye West, maybe Beyonce.
I want people,
as big, if not bigger. Maybe Drake. So I would say to those guys, he would be bigger. I'd say that to them. I'd say to Kanye West and Jay-Z. I have nothing against them, but I would say to them, I said, if Sam Cooke were alive, he'd be bigger than you guys. But I don't think they want to hear that, but
yeah. But the thing that people got to understand, people got to do their research and stop letting, like, One Night in Miami could not be made without ABCO. ABCO,
that's right. That's what I heard.
Like you said, they own his music.
Yeah,
he probably generates millions of dollars every year with his own with the catalog. Because he also controls some of the Rolling Stones. They broke up the Beatles. You know what I'm saying? Like Alan Klein. Clients, including the Rolling Stones.
That's what's really scary. This guy, after he got involved with Sam Cooke, he became, I think, a manager. He became involved with the Beatles. I hear that Paul McCartney didn't like him.
It broke up the
Paul
Beatles.
McCartney ever hears this, I agree with you, Paul. You're right not to like Alan. I don't know if Paul McCartney will ever come across this, but if he does, Paul, your instincts were right. You were right not to trust him. The Rolling Stones fought him in court because he was a manager. And he basically, his modus operandi was this. He gets decent deals or good deals for his clients, but he gets better deals for himself. So he wants access to publishing, what would be known in rights circles, I believe, in the music industry as mechanical rights, meaning the rights that music companies and corporations pay to songwriters. And then you have neighboring rights, which relate to the master recordings or masters. And those are what companies and other corporations and other pay to the owners of the recordings, used for elevator music or other music elsewhere. So Sam wanted all that. So the joke that I have about his hit song, You Send Me, was Sam's business approach was, you send me royalties from neighboring rights. You send me royalties from mechanical rights. You send me royalties and checks for everything. That's what Sam Cooke wanted. Total control of his music. And you do that by controlling the masters. Look into Ray Charles. Ray Charles supposedly controlled his masters, or tried to. You control the masters, you control the music. You look at Michael Jackson and Prince. Both of those guys fought with music labels. In Michael Jackson's case, Sony. In the case of Prince, it was Warner Brothers. In fact, Prince wanted his masters from Warner Brothers. Why? Because you get the neighboring rights, you get those monies, right?
Yep.
You know, and the music business. Well, you're a musician, so you know all this. So
well, you'd be surprised, but
you
the thing about it, be surprised what you do and do not know. There's a lot of smart people, and everybody plays the fool, as the song goes. Everybody plays the fool, no exception to the rule. But why don't people understand? Ray Charles was close to Sam Cooke. They were both business-minded, enterprising, young, black, creative geniuses. But also, I would always tell people, there's a lot of people in Sam Cooke's circle that died crazy deaths. They were business-oriented. They were very ambitious. Like you look at the guy who created Dolphins of Hollywood. You know, the guy who on that record shop,
right.
Dolphins of Hollywood.
John Dolphin, I think his name was.
Yeah.
I heard of that guy.
Him about you got to control your publishing. You got to control. You telling Sam to do that, and what happened to him? They got rid of him, Nipsey Hussle style. They had this disgruntled musician kill him at his place of business. Like Nipsey Hussle got killed by that dude a couple years ago. That was one of Sam Cooke's mentors. Then also February the 6th, 1960, he had a cat named Jesse Belvin, who was like, you know, Etta James said had he lived long enough, he would have been bigger than Sam Cooke and all them guys. And he died in a crazy car accident with his wife after performing with Sam Cooke in Little Rock at the first integrated concert in Little Rock's history. Not only did you have Jesse Belvin, you had Sam Cooke, Jackie Wilson, and Marv Johnson performing at that concert. They are being harassed by white supremacists, racists, whatever you want to call them. And as soon as they leave that concert, him, his manager wife, who was 25 at the time, and another person got killed in a car accident near Hope, Arkansas, where Bill Clinton is from. He's just 27 years young, but this is the cat that wrote some of your favorite songs you never knew. He wrote Earth Angel, that famous Earth Angel song. And he wrote a couple other songs that used to close out Dick Clark's American Bandstand. He wrote that song. So I'm saying he died at 27. It's a lot of songs he didn't get credited for writing. So you got people like that around in Sam Cooke's circle. They were very enterprising like him and dying crazy deaths. But Jesse Belvin, remember that name, February 6, 1960. Could have been the next Nat King Cole or Sam Cooke or bigger than them all, according to Etta James, who grew up with Jesse Belvin in Los Angeles.
Interesting, isn't it? Well, the music industry is, I used to review music briefly when I was in LA. I used to write for a magazine called Rapport, and I used to do music reviews. It was my only foray into music in that aspect. And the music industry is, oh my goodness. That industry is totally corrupt. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to come out and say it. That industry is totally corrupt. And it's an industry, when you look at its inner workings, and when you do, if anyone cares to do, I'm just on a basic level. It's about, and the analogy I make is with actors in Hollywood and filmmakers and so forth. Hollywood will take its, pound of flesh. It'll take its money, but at least it'll leave you with maybe the shirt on your back, pants you're wearing, maybe your shoes, socks. Music industry, forget it. Guys like this guy, Alan Klein.
Oh God.
They'll take your shirt, your shoes, your pants, and if they feel like it, even your underwear. And they'll leave you as nearly naked as they did Sam Cooke when he was found.
And you know what's interesting? Like, it ties into Otis Redding, who died crazily, like on December 11, 1967. That's 3 years after Sam. They said Otis had $10,000 in a suitcase. Some people that pulled his body out that frozen or cold, icy lake in Wisconsin said he had $10,000 in a suitcase that never was officially recovered. Now, the people turned it in to the police. People got to realize back then, police officers in Wisconsin made $5,000 in the whole year. So you had a black man that did a couple one night, as far as music goes, made $10,000 in his suitcase, and they never turned it in to the family. So it's like, Sam Cooke had thousands of dollars in his money clip, and that went missing, and nobody was accountable for that. Nobody was ever held accountable for that. So, but also while Otis Redding, he was talking about controlling his distribution of his music with James Brown. Him and James Brown, according to James Brown's son, was going to go into the music distribution business, controlling black music. Now, Otis Redding wrote the song "Respect" that Aretha made famous. He wrote that song. He wrote "Sit on the Dock of the Bay." He controlled his publishing at the time of his death. Allegedly at the age of 26, he controlled his publishing. But really, it's just weird all the way around, because I had a chance to talk to folks who work with Otis at Stax, and they were saying that he was just like with Sam. They were too boastful. They'll let everybody know their next moves and stuff like that. And they was like, we want to control our music. And look what happened to him. Even look at Prince. He died on the anniversary once he got his publishing back from Warner. Time Warner Brothers. He got killed around the same time of the anniversary of that happening, the year anniversary. Dying on the elevator. So, I mean, they send all these messages to people. Even if you go to hip hop with Suge Knight and Irv Gotti from Murder Inc. and Jay Prince from Rap A Lot, they wanted to control the distribution of their music, and the feds came down on them. Suge's in jail right now. Irv Gotti was fighting for his life with his brother against the feds, and Jay Prince was harassed by the federal government for years. It's like anytime black people want to come together, control their economics. You look at this is the centennial year of the Black Wall Street bombing down in Tulsa. And from my understanding, talking to the elders, they said they used the black people airplanes that they own to bomb their own community. It's like we black people get punished when they try to control their economics and try to practice self-determination. Like right now, I'm broadcasting right across the street from a Lorraine Motel where they assassinated Dr. King. And also, this was the epicenter of the Memphis race massacre of 1866, when you had the white police officers in Memphis raping, killing, and pillaging black people, burning down all the schools and churches in Memphis. This one act led to Congress passing Reconstruction in America. Robert Church, the first black millionaire of the South, was shot in his saloon on Beale Street, point blank. He survived that to save Memphis from the yellow fever epidemic when it lost its city charter. And Robert Church was one of the businessmen that invested in Black Wall Street. When black folks left Memphis after the People's Grocery lynching of 1892, Ida B. Wells told them to move west, places like Oklahoma. About 6,000 black folks left Memphis. A lot of them settled in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Robert Church Sr. put a lot of money into the making of Black Wall Street. That's the first black millionaire of the South from Memphis. So I'm saying every day I wake up, I think about what they did to Dr. King here in Memphis. And it's always an inside job, because what Judge Joe Brown proved is that the gun didn't, James Earl Ray didn't do that. The gun came from the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That gun that killed Dr. King came from them. Just like the informant that helped set up Fred Hampton in Chicago came from the FBI. He gave the floor plans to his handler, and they killed 21-year-old Fred Hampton and 22-year-old Mark Clark in that apartment on the west side of Chicago back on December 4th, 1969. Now we know that the government was involved in the killing of Malcolm X. That's coming out now. So who's to say that, no telling what they did to Sam Cooke, who was involved in civil rights, who was friends with Dr. King and Malcolm X, who's very vocal about standing up for himself and for his people.
Sorry.
No, you good. Like same thing with Billie Holiday. That movie.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
You're good. But I'm saying what people didn't know about Alan Klein and his involvement, his folks still eating off the work, blood, sweat, and tears of Sam Cooke. The price he paid, he died at 33 years young. Sam Cooke was just 33 years young. Otis was just 26. They paid the price for sticking up for themselves and demanding that they be respected. Because Sam Cooke probably could have been bigger than Motown had he lived.
Possibility. Possibility.
I guess we covered enough of Sam. Let's do. I know you got some other things you want to talk about. What about the Bob Crane story? I think it's fascinating.
Right. So that's my assessment. Like I said, of Sam Cooke, and I was on some other shows. You could check him out. In a more extensive examination of that.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like your kind of rundown and bringing up some historical aspects, historical factors. So I was the first, when it came to murder cases, the first thing I was interviewed about was Bob Crane. Bob Crane was the star of Hogan's Heroes.
Right.
And some people out there may remember the show. Hogan's Heroes was actually kind of, at the time it debuted on CBS, kind of a controversial show because it was a show that was set in a prisoner of war camp during World War II. It was a sitcom based in that. And so Bob Crane was, when he was murdered in 1978, I was 8 years old. That was the first celebrity death I was aware of in my life. That seems odd to say, but that was the first celebrity death that I had heard of. So, and it always kind of stuck in my mind, the death of Bob Crane, because he was bludgeoned to death. So years later, I ended up reading about it. Yes, good point. Bobby Fuller is another one that I've looked into. Bobby Fuller is another one I was interested in. Yeah,
he was
Bobby
connected
Fuller is
to
another one I looked into.
He connected to
that
Klein
one
too?
is really. Go ahead. Sorry.
Now he was connected to Klein too. Bobby Fuller.
I'm trying to remember.
I know he wrote "They Fought the Law." That's the song. "They Fought the Law" and the Law Won. Yeah.
He was connected to other. There were other elements that were interested in Bobby Fuller. But what I would say, when it comes to Bobby Fuller, that's another one that I've looked into, done research on. That one is really very clear that one is whereas with Sam Cooke, they at least made an effort to wrap that up and have a coroner's inquest. Bobby Fuller, they just didn't seem to care. It was shocking how they didn't care about the man. I mean, it was like irrelevant. Authorities just didn't care in that case. And I won't go into that because that's probably for another show, another discussion.
But yeah, you definitely right, man.
Yeah, that one is clear. I mean, I looked at that one, I went, whoa, they just didn't give a damn. They just didn't. So with Bob Crane, he was killed. He was doing what was that? He was doing dinner theater in 1978. Yeah. He was in doing something called Beginner's Luck. So he's in a play called Beginner's Luck, and he traveled across the country doing Beginner's Luck because Hogan's Heroes, which ran, I think, from 65 until about the early 70s. Right. Him and off the air. He had tried having a show in the mid 70s on NBC called the Bob Crane Show. Didn't go over. I think it had like 13 episodes or so. And he was doing this dinner theater, getting by and doing dinner theater. And he was found in the apartment of the Windmill Theater. Bludgeoned, I think, was at least 2 blows to the skull from a heavy object. And when I was interviewed about Bob Crane's death, the belief at the time, prevailing belief has always been that John Carpenter, who was a friend of Bob Crane's, was the killer.
Not the Hollywood one. People like, you talking about the Mr. Hollywood horror, John Carpenter? No, not him.
No, not him. Not the director. No, not the director of They Live. No, don't mix him up in this. Don't want to get him. Don't want to get him angry. No, not him. John Carpenter. He was a friend of Bob Crane's. He was a guy who worked for Sony. Was selling, I think, VCRs and setting up VCRs in the 60s when they were relatively new in the market. And they were high profile. So pretty expensive. even in the 70s when I was a kid, when I saw VCRs, they were still pretty costly. You know, I don't think we got one in my family until about the 80s. So, and so you look at John Carpenter met Bob Crane on the set, I believe, of Hogan's Heroes. I think Richard Dawson, you know, the host of Family Feud, he was one of the cast members of Family Feud, I was going to say Family Feud, but no, of Hogan's Heroes. And they had issues. Now, the belief is that John Carpenter, again, is the killer of Bob Crane. In fact, he was put on trial, I think, in the early 90s.
Right.
Because the murder was in 1978, and Bob had bludgeoned. Now, this was one of the early ones that I was interviewed about, was Bob Crane. And I stated on a show called Parallax Views, I stated quite frankly that I don't believe that John Carpenter murdered Bob Crane. Was he a good suspect? Yes. Did he have means and opportunity? Of course. I don't doubt that he was a good suspect. I can agree with that. But the reality was, it just didn't add up that Carpenter was the guy. Primarily to me because people count, they say, well, he made calls to the apartment after, when the police were there and they discovered Bob's body, and that he made calls to the Windmill Theater, which was the theater he was doing the theater show at. And he made calls to the apartment. He was calling Bob Crane's son, Bob Jr. And I go, what makes sense? That a guy who's going to go and murder someone like Bob Crane is then going to fly to California, because they were in Arizona, in Scottsdale, Arizona. They're going to fly to Arizona. He's going to fly back to California. Then he's going to go and make phone calls to the apartment where Bob was staying at and where his body was at. And he's going to go call the theater. He's going to call everyone. That doesn't add up. Again, you look at the smell test. I'm going, if he's not trying to put suspicion on himself, he's doing a bad job, because police got suspicious. They tried getting a confession out of him. And they in 1978, they tried talking him. They tried coercing a confession. Didn't work. They couldn't shake him. And my point is this with John Carpenter. I believe he was in the apartment the night that Bob died. I think he knew that Bob was dead. I think that explains his behavior. The problem I had with this case was the blood evidence in the car. They had minuscule traces of blood in Carpenter's rental car. This guy called John Hook, who was a reporter at a station, I think, in Arizona, Fox Station, Arizona. He looked into the case, and they had the blood. They were able to get evidence from the case, and they had the remaining blood evidence tested with Cellmark Laboratories. Now, those people who have looked at the O.J. Simpson trial were real eagles, may have heard of that lab. And they went to Cellmark Laboratories, which also tested the blood in the John Carpenter trial in the early 90s, that he was found not guilty. And they found that Bob's DNA wasn't there in that car, in the rental car. I never liked the blood evidence in that case. I thought it was suspicious. I thought the police thought they had an easy suspect in John Carpenter. I can kind of understand that. But when you look at what Bob was involved with, his sexual proclivity, the fact he was photographing women in the nude and topless, that he was videotaping them. Back in the 70s, those videotape machines and he brought it everywhere on his tour of Beginner's Luck. He brought that camera, he brought everything with him. So they're going to just zero in on Carpenter. Even this guy, John Hook, wrote this book. I think it's called Who Killed Bob Crane? And I think he wanted to definitively prove that Carpenter killed him, and he couldn't. I've said before, and I'll say it again, I don't think Carpenter killed Crane. He could have done it, but it just doesn't add up to me. The blood evidence was suspect. This guy was bludgeoned with a heavy object. That meant whoever had hit him got blood on them. And if it was the tripod or camera tripod, as they believe it was, would a bludgeoning or a camera tripod have left that little kind of blood in the car? And why would it be in the rental side? Like, why not just simply put it in the back? Like, open up the trunk and put it in the back. Wrap it up in something, put it in the trunk.
And also, Brother Albert, if you look at the crime scene photo, it's gruesome. It should be more blood in the car. I mean, it should be like more,
That's
you know what I'm saying?
point.
A lot more, I think. I'm not an expert on them. You look at the crime scene photo, how it bashed his brains out and splatter all over the wall and stuff.
On the wall, on the bed, yeah. That was my point.
Yeah.
The blood evidence didn't add up to me. I mean, you could argue that somebody might have cleaned themselves, got in the bathroom and cleaned themselves, but they would have left fingerprints. So, you know, if John went in the shower and did it, what did he do? Have gloves on and take a shower or something? I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm going, something doesn't add. I mean, it didn't add up to me. It just didn't add up. I never bought that Carpenter was the guy in it. Was he a viable suspect? Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. But it just didn't add up to me. And there was no real motive. Oh, Bob wanted to stop being friends with him. From a male perspective, what kind of man goes out and kills another guy because they're not pals? They're not friends. That doesn't, I'm not aware of too many murder cases where men have done that. I'm talking straight men.
Yeah, you know what? I want to add this too. I heard, I saw they said, I was reading, I'm trying to do my homework before I interview you, but I heard that they were at a restaurant together and they were very friendly. Nobody didn't see any type of hostile body language between them. They were cool. And you know, I heard, is it true that the Scottsdale, Arizona Police Department didn't have a homicide department at that time when Bob Crane died? They didn't have a homicide, an official homicide.
That I'm aware of.
Yeah, I read that. I don't, you know, that's crazy. They're like the Keystone Cops, so they don't really know what the hell they doing. They're out of their water or their element with this.
Yeah, it was, you know, it was a celebrity murder. So you got a celebrity. Bob Crane was a TV star in a kind of sleepy little city like Scottsdale, and Scottsdale didn't get a lot of murders, from what I understand. They didn't get a lot of cases, and they certainly didn't get celebrity. And I'm like, you know, for me, something, it just never added up to me. I looked at that, I went, wait, the blood is minuscule. And I could see why the county attorney at the time, Hyder, I think his name was Hyder, didn't want to go and serve a warrant and make a case against Carpenter, because he felt we need a, I think the injunction was, you need a murder weapon or a confession. And both of those are reasonable. You know, you could argue about prosecutors all day long and be critical about them, and there are very good reasons to be. But in this case, it absolutely made sense. I think that was a reasonable standard in regards to Bob Crane's death. I mean, it was reasonable. You know, a murder weapon, confession. Prosecutors like sure things. Going in there with blood evidence that was typed, and supposedly the type matched Bob Crane's, which was pretty rare. It was a B negative or something like that. I'm trying to remember the blood type, but it was a rare blood type. Again, I didn't see enough evidence. I saw circumstantial evidence, right? Circumstances were John Carpenter could have done it, no doubt. But when you look at the nature, the photographs, the videotapes, Bob had videotapes of himself having sex with numerous women.
Well, and was it consensual? Did he get their consent, or were he hiding stuff? Was he like Earl Flynn, or was he out in the open with it?
It's very well. It had to be, because back then in the 70s, if you look at photos of the video equipment that Bob Crane had, especially in the apartment, it's evident. It's right there. So if women didn't think they were being taped, I don't know. I mean, I know, granted, people didn't know videotape technology that well in the 1970s, because not a lot of people had videotape technology. I was aware of it because I knew people who had videotape recorders. I'd go to their house to watch videos.
Yeah, it'd be
watch
like you
stuff on
can't hide
Hulu.
that type of stuff. You wouldn't be able to hide it way it was back then. You know, I guess it was
Yeah,
too buck to
I
hide
mean,
it.
it's very clear. It was out in the open. The camera
Yeah,
was out in the open, tripod, wires, all of that, and
you
they
know,
could see themselves on TV.
there you go.
And Bob
I mean,
wasn't. My understanding is Bob wasn't. Bob wasn't a sleazy guy that way. I mean, yeah, he was
mm,
a. It was a. He was a. He was a guy who loved his sex life, but he
right.
wasn't a sleazy guy. So, you know,
I
um,
yeah.
but
Now I remember I read somewhere where one of his sons had a website where you actually allow people to see some of the porn that he produced for a fee. He was charging folks a fee to see some of his father's porn.
interesting.
And no, the website no longer exists
Well, it
now.
depends on which son that was.
Yeah, but about
Depends
my
on which son that was.
now his co-star who he
So he
married.
has a son with his second wife, Patty Scotty,
Yeah,
and then he
yeah,
had Bob Jr. by his first wife, Ann. So
yeah.
in terms of sons, so
Well,
I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure which son was the one that.
yeah, but one of his sons, they had that site where he was like, letting
Yeah.
people see. I mean, it's like you think about, Kim Kardashian with her sex tape. So Bob Crane was really ahead of his time.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he was a pioneer in that field.
That's
You
one
know,
way
but,
to that's one way to look at it.
yeah, but you know
I
what?
don't think he would have wanted to be known that way, but
Well, the thing about
he was very involved. He is very involved in the his sex life was very diverse, from what I understand, fairly diverse from what I understand. And my understanding was that there were rumors about his sexual proclivities in Hollywood at the time.
yeah.
So the word was getting out about him.
Well,
Of course, it was found out after his death, but
yeah, but like the sex sales, you think about what the T.I. and Tiny thing going on in Atlanta and all this stuff. I mean, it's always been around. You talk about Earl Flynn, you talk about, Hugh Hefner, all these people, they had those type of things going on. It's part of the culture, So, but also I heard that I read rather that his second wife, the one he met on Hogan's Hero, Olsen, she had his whole estate to herself. She got in the will, he left everything to her allegedly. So they really
she
caused
wanted the kid from his previous marriage because he had two daughters and the son, Bob Jr., and then two daughters. He wanted them out. She wanted them out. That was a volatile marriage between Patty. Okay. Ooh, volatile marriage. Go ahead.
The first marriage you talking about?
No, second.
The second one. Okay, but she's buried next to him now. She died in 2007 or 2008, I believe. His second wife. She's buried next to him. Yeah, they buried next to each other now. But she got his whole estate, and the family didn't like that. You know how family fight over money and stuff and over things of that nature.
Well, I know she cut the kids out. She tried cutting the kids out, and she wanted the kids from the first marriage cut out.
You're right.
I know.
So, but he was over the estate. Yeah, he left it allegedly to her. And these wills are interesting because people leave wills and people don't think they mean anything. I mean, Michael Jackson had several wills. They said Prince didn't leave no will, he was fighting for his masters, which cost him his life. It don't make sense to me. A guy who have a vault of unreleased music would not have a will after fighting time.
So you're saying that Prince died intestate with no will?
That's what they saying, but you know how that goes, man. It's like,
it's okay, believe, but
well, I'm gonna ask you this: who do you think or killed Bob Crane then, if it wasn't John Carpenter? That trial was in '94. John Carpenter was dead.
My view is that my view is that it had to be a female. But there was a female in the apartment. Okay. That's my view, because Bob was very security conscious. He always locked the door behind him. So I believe a female was involved. I don't think it was simply a man. I don't think Bob would have allowed a guy into his apartment late that night. And so he always locked the door behind anyone who left. He would not have left the door open. So again, habits and behavior of the victim, when you look at. Because I think he had a place broken into in Chicago years ago or something like that. So he was very, very, very conscious of that. So he always kept that door closed. So whoever came in, unless they had a key, that's possible. The only way I could think they could come in would be a key, but Bob was reportedly a light sleeper. So if a noise happened, someone came in and there was a noise, Bob would get up because he was a light sleeper. So it's very clear to me. I think a woman was involved. I think it was female.
Well, wait,
If a woman didn't actually do the bludgeoning, then she was involved with someone else.
Well, I want to ask: was he compromised? The toxicology report, and was he under the influence? Was he drunk? I mean, did he have drugs in the system where his alertness could be compromised?
I don't believe he didn't drink. Bob was a teetotaler. He didn't really drink. I don't think he took drugs. So he was just sleeping. When he died, he was sleeping. He was in a fetal position. He was sleeping.
Well, you think a woman could do that by herself, to strangle him with that cord around his neck?
Well, I think, yes. Yeah, the cord aspect. See, that's why I don't think it was Bob. See, that's another reason I don't think it was John Carpenter. John Carpenter is going to go bash this guy in the head. Then he's going to take a cord from a VCR and cut it, wrap it around Bob's throat or neck. And again, I look at this case, it's like there was a big arrow pointing toward John Carpenter. I believe whoever did this wanted John Carpenter to take the fall. Very clear to me. That VCR cord, after all, what did John service? What was he involved with? Electronic equipment like VCR. And help, video, set him up. That's how he and Bob came to be friends, helping him with his electronic needs. So I'm going, he's going to go. And again, they couldn't shake, the police could not shake John Carpenter. They couldn't get him to confess. John Carpenter was cooperative. He provided them with blood. So if this guy did it, he certainly wasn't stupid. And I'm going, and so his actions strike me as odd. That's why I don't believe John did it. I don't believe he was. But I believe he was in the apartment that night. I believe he was in the apartment that night.
Yeah, let me put this up for the people, because this makes more sense than anything I ever heard. And it's like the National Enquirer is like a broke clock is right at least twice a day. National Enquirer, they got a lot of truth and a lot. Because if they didn't have a lot of truth in what they were saying, they would be out of business by now. But I just want to put this by people. This from the National Enquirer. You can find this online, but let me read a little bit from it. It says, Bob Crane, Kinky, Hogan's hero star, was killed by Porn King. And this came out in 2016. And it said, Bob Crane's killer has been unmasked. And the man who killed the Hogan's hero star was tied to his kinky double life as an underground pornographer. A special investigation by the National Enquirer has revealed claims that the sex-crazed 49-year-old actor, who was assessed with shooting private X-rated videos of his raunchy romps and orgies, was slain by L.A. mob boss Dominique Brooklier. A source revealed the gangster ran the porn business in L.A. and supplied Crane with a bevy of beauties to bed in his private skin flicks. In return, Crane agreed to star in 2 films. One was a regular romantic comedy, and the other was a triple X-rated flick. Both would be secretly financed by the racketeer, but when Crane balked at doing the X-rated movie for general distribution, which would have destroyed his regular acting career, hot-tempered Brooklier went ballistic and ordered hitmen to rub out the double-crossing actor. So this is what the National Enquirer had back in 2016. And if you read a little bit,
I didn't come across that. It's funny. I never heard that. But it's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing, just to respond to that.
Okay.
It's plausible because they looked at John Carpenter. And to my knowledge, I don't know that the Scottsdale PD examined a lot of other possible suspects. I think they may have looked at a couple other people.
But they didn't even have a homicide.
For example,
they didn't have a homicide department. They didn't have a homicide department at the time.
They just had detectives.
Yeah.
Just the way it was. My view was that I look at that and I go, here's what I would say about that story, with the National Enquirer story. I don't know that Bob, I was aware that Bob was involved with, various other aspects, in regards, I mean, he just didn't have a sex life. He was involved in certain other aspects, like swinging, for example. and other kinds of things, which I won't go into detail about. Clearly, Bob had seen pornography, so that's clear. I mean, porn films. I don't buy that Bob, who was the star of a network TV show, would star in an X-rated film. You also have to keep in mind Bob was in Disney movies. He'd been in a movie called Super Dad, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Disney people had heard a little of his proclivities or what was going on with his private life.
All right.
And I don't buy that Bob would star in 2 porn films.
No, it was
or
one.
At least,
one.
Sorry, at least one.
And
or be in 2.
But think about it though. He was struggling to maintain his career. I think the mob boss offered him $1 million plus a percentage of the profits. So I mean, it'll be very lucrative for him, but
it would have destroyed his career.
But
if he had done that, it would destroy his career. There's no way in the '70s, even in Porn Chic in the '70s. And I've I had to, let me see. I actually was going to do a article on the porn industry in Hawaii, so I had to do research. I didn't know anything about the porn industry, so I had to interview people in the porn industry in Hawaii, the few there are, and I did research, reading about it, what sources there were, even in Porn Chic in the '70s. There's no way that Bob Crane, who was on a network TV show, on a CBS hit sitcom, and had been on an NBC show, his career would have been over if he had done a porn film. Even in the '70s, even when it was being touted, even when it was being seen as mainstream. Porn is not seen as mainstream now, even though people look at it these days. It's easily accessible. People can look at it. It was not considered, porn's not considered mainstream now, but it was considered vaguely mainstream in the '70s, like chic, hot, different. Even back then, there's no way that you're going to have a career if you were to do a porn film. So I'm looking at that, I'm going, yeah, I don't buy it.
But I think about it. He's in the ebb and flow of his career with actors, a lot of struggling.
Right.
Like, he was just a big star for 6 seasons on Hogan's Hero. Then he had his self-entitled show, it bombed. And so it might have been a moment of weakness that he could have considered, and then he backed out the deal. But the dude made him an offer he was supposed to refuse. And that's what happened. He thought about what you said. I'm image conscious. I want to still have my mainstream career, but he made a deal with the devil. He had to pay.
I think that I think if Bob's agent or manager or anyone involved in had been aware of that, there's no way they would have allowed Bob to get involved in that. I mean, even
he probably told him this what he probably asked him, say, is this a good idea? No, it's not a good idea, Bob. Do not touch that stuff. And he went back to that mob boss, and the mob boss got mad. And you can't say no to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could see that playing out. It was tunnel vision.
Yeah. I could buy that he could have pissed off that mob boss.
Yeah.
Somehow, and then the mob boss could have sent someone to kill him. That's feasible. I don't buy that he was going to star in a porn film and that he was going to appear in a porn film. There's just no way that. I don't buy that at all. That would have ruined his career totally. I mean, his career would have been over. Even in the '70s, it would have been over.
They would have said, like, the National Enquirer backs up what you're saying, but think about it. This man is doing dinner theater, and this dude offer you $1 million off the top, and then a percentage of the profits is going to make a lot of money because it's like, look at Kim Kardashian. She's legitimate. People don't think about her as getting a career boost off on a sex tape with Ray J.
Right, but that's
Kim Kardashian is very mainstream.
Right, but here's what you got to understand: she's not a porn star or porn actress. She just made a private tape, and the tape went out there.
Well, that's what Bob was doing, right?
Very different. He's an actor. If he's in an actual porn film, no way. Even nowadays, you just don't do that. You don't do that now, and it's a lot more permissible, and it's a lot more acceptable in terms of this society. Maybe not by much, but it still is. And in terms of the business, there's no way you can't make that transition. It's very hard to make the transition from mainstream to film to porn and back again. It's just not done.
And you know what?
Fortunately, you would get a role or something. I don't buy that he would star in it. Maybe if you're involved behind the scenes, like producing or putting up money, maybe. But of course, those films were largely like backed by organized crime to a great extent years ago in the 70s.
You know, I was just thinking about
the pipeline between organized crime and the porn industry, and that's where the financing came from. So, like Bryanston Films, for example, which did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, was involved in porn films.
Yeah,
but I don't buy that.
Yeah, I was thinking about. I mean, I think it's plausible to me. That's from I'm not saying that he would have went through. He didn't go through with it. Obviously, he thought about it. He had buyer's remorse, and it cost him his life. That's why I look at. But when you said that, I was thinking about Montana Fishburne. I think Lawrence Fishburne's daughter, who got into porn, and I don't think it worked out for her in terms of if she wanted to get into acting. Her daddy has a name, he has connections, but she went the porn route. And I don't think it worked out for her too well. I haven't seen any footage or anything. But what I'm saying, I think it's interesting that with him, like in that movie Autofocus, they try to claim that that he had a relationship with John Carpenter. But it's like you more. But his folks said like his second son, his Scott from his second marriage said no, he was heterosexual.
Oh yeah, Bob Crane was. Even Carpenter said that. The whole idea that Carpenter was bisexual and had a thing for Bob, I don't buy.
Yeah,
I don't buy that.
Yeah,
I don't buy that at all. And again, I mean, Autofocus, which is quite a good film, unfortunately, kind of cast Carpenter as nothing more than a hanger-on.
Right.
And he was a hanger-on of sorts, but he was a guy who was involved. Again, it wasn't like this guy didn't have a job and he didn't have a career, he didn't have a life. He was involved with working for Sony, working for Akai, working for all these companies. And that was how he met Bob. He knew celebrities, he knew famous people, so he was used to that. Yeah, he and Bob got friendly because they were both, kind of ladies' men. But yeah, I don't buy that.
What's my put up? Tracy Lords got into mainstream.
Well, you got to understand, her situation was different. Her situation is different. There are people in that industry, from what I understand, that have done roles in TV shows and movies. So it's not like they didn't work, but it's hard. You can't really be like a star and be from that industry. And don't get me started about Tracy Lords. I got a lot of suspicions about, when I was doing my research, I went, her case is very, very suspicious. Very. And nothing against the lady. It's not the lady. It's nothing Tracy. It has nothing to do with Tracy per se, but what was going on in her case, very, very suspicious.
Like when did the porn movie Deep Throat come out? When did that come out?
I was in the 70s.
So I'm just thinking that's thing about it. He said, man, it made a lot of money, right? And it got a lot of notoriety. You don't think they could have crossed his mind saying, maybe I could do this? And then he just reneged on it. Like he just said, nah, better not. Like you said,
the only way I see it is if Bob were going to produce something. I don't think he would have acted in anything, but he might have. It's a possibility he could have been involved in a producer. Production aspect as a producer. So if he were going to produce, act, no, but produce, it could have been. But again, those films, from what I understand, I'm not an expert in this area, but most films, from what I understand, in the 70s at least, were largely mob financed, organized crime financed. That's where the pipeline of funding came from. So I think it's a lot more plausible, because I know that Bob was involved in, I guess, a number of aspects, not just in just having, one night stands with women and photographing, but he was photographing them, he was videotaping them, and he was involved in other aspects. I could believe that he may have been trying to produce. you know,
Well,
that he
man, this
couldn't.
like somebody brought up in the chat. Malcolm McDowell was in Caligula. That was a triple X mainstream film, right? And he still
But he
got a
was
career.
already, yeah, but he was already an established actor.
Okay, but
He was
why couldn't that?
already an established actor. So
So
he
they couldn't.
wasn't, yeah,
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
he was already an established actor and is an established actor. So he wasn't, you know, it's not, again, and that was rated X, right?
I think, yeah.
I guess you could call it you could call it that, but because it was, I think it was Penthouse, Bob Guccione was behind that.
Okay.
But again, you had legitimate actors in that film, so it's not like you had a bunch of adult film stars. You had, what's her name, Helen Mirren, I think John Gielgud, and you had a number of actors in it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Peter O'Toole.
Right.
I like, okay.
Right. So you had a number of actors in that movie. So you had legit actors in that movie.
And
so
Gore Vidal did the screenplay. Gore Vidal did the screenplay.
Right. Playwright, essayist, and novelist. So
yeah,
that's different.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it is weird. It's a thin line. It's just a thin line with this type of stuff. That's interesting.
Like I said, I don't buy that Carpenter killed Bob at all. I don't buy it. I mean, he's a very good suspect. He was a very good suspect, but it just didn't add up. Blood evidence in the car didn't add up to me. There wasn't a sufficient motive. And it just struck me, if this guy killed Bob, he's going to go call the apartment. He's going to call the windmill. Why would he go out of his way to attract attention to himself? It just didn't add up. Just didn't add up. Yeah.
Okay, it said Guccione refused to submit Caligula to the MPAA because he did not want the film to receive a rating, even X, which he considered to be demeaning. Instead, Guccione applied his own mature audiences rating to the film, instructing theater owners not to admit anyone under the age of 18. Okay, that's interesting. So I learned so much about
because the X rating at that point was not copyrighted by the NAA. It was not, the X rating was not copyrighted by the MPAA. I guess this is where my film film reviewer background comes in. The MPAA did not copyright the X rating, so the X rating could be applied by anybody. So it wasn't owned. They didn't have copyright. That was not copyrighted. I don't.
So do you think then the person who possibly could have killed Bob Crane was somebody he interacted with on his video, like a woman, a jealous lover? So you going from that? Is a crime of passion?
I believe a female was involved.
Say it again.
I believe a female was involved. I believe female was involved.
Okay,
yeah.
It's hard.
So I believe there was a woman in the apartment that night. There may have been also a male as well. So it could have been two people. But I honestly believe that a woman was involved in this, because I look at, the thing about this John Hook guy, who's a reporter with the Arizona station. Everybody just wants it to be John Carpenter, but you got to look at the evidence. You got to look at the facts, and the facts don't. They point to, yes, Carpenter could have done it. Very logical suspect, but I think John Hook got shown up because the blood was found not to be Crane's. In the rental car was not to be Crane. So I'm like, if his blood's not there in that car, I mean, you may have the blood type, but if its DNA's not in the car, and you don't have anything tying Carpenter to that crime, you didn't have a murder weapon, you didn't have evidence, you didn't, to my knowledge, there wasn't specific fingerprints of his there. Right. So, and then you also had a black bag of Bob's. He had a black bag he would carry with him. He put a photo album in it because he had photo albums of Polaroids of different women. He had a black bag, and he never let anybody look in this black bag. He was very open about his sex life. He was very open about his private life, but he never let anybody look at this black bag. And that black bag was empty. Go ahead.
I was looking at what the jury member said about the 94 trial with John Carpenter. It said one jury member later said in an interview that the jury believed there was insufficient proof to determine Carpenter's guilt and that you cannot prove someone guilty on speculation. Well, what about Bill Cosby? Well, have people got dumbed down since 94? Like, wow. So even the jury had a lot of sense. They had more sense than him because they had tunnel vision. Because it was no other suspects outside of John Carpenter, right? They never considered anybody else.
Right. Not to my knowledge. I think they may have tried to determine whether Patty Crane, who was Bob Crane's second wife, she had visited him in Scottsdale. That was like 10 days before he died.
Okay.
But supposedly she was living in Washington State, and I think they checked airline flights, and they couldn't connect her. They couldn't find that she was there that day or that night, apparently, when Bob was killed.
But you saying Carpenter was there the last day, right? He was in their apartment. Carpenter.
She was there, I think, a few days. She was there. She was in Scottsdale. They visited, unexpected visit, and it was unpleasant from what I understand. I mean, it was uncomfortable from what I understand.
But with Carpenter, you saying that he was in an apartment the last day of his life, right? John Carpenter was in an apartment at one point, or was he not? He did visit a couple days before he died.
I believe that. Here's what I think. I think Carpenter knew that John died. I mean, that Bob died. That's what accounts for his odd behavior. Just calling everyone and the rental car and everything. I believe he was in the apartment that night. How he was there, I don't know. Why he was there. Again, my suspicion is that someone wanted John to take the rap for this. Because it made sense. John was at the Sunburst nearby. Sunburst Inn down the street. He had been on every leg of the Beginner's Luck tour with Bob, and he was a natural suspect because they were friends.
Right.
To me, if I had to say anyone, Victoria Perry was kind of suspicious to me. She was an actress that was in the production, and she was the one that discovered Bob because he was supposed to go to some luncheon that day. And she came over, and she was supposed to come over at a certain time, and she came a little earlier. And she knocked on the door. I think she stated she had knocked on the door a couple times or a few times. Then she tried the doorknob, and it opened. And my view is this: as I said before, Bob used to lock the door after people left. He was very security conscious that way. He always locked the door. Victoria had been in his apartment a few times, so she knew probably what Bob would do. So my point is this: why would she try to open the door? She had to have known that Bob would lock the door. Why did she try opening it? Right away, to me, that said something to me. And she walked in and she saw, not at first, she couldn't make out, but eventually she saw, I guess, that it was Bob. Or at least saw someone was in the bed there. She couldn't make it out because it was dark. But it was always suspicious that Bob always locked that door behind him. He never let that, he wasn't one to leave the door open. He always made sure it was locked, double locked from what I hear. So I'm like, no, I don't buy it. And I look at her and I go, she knew more than she was letting on.
Is she still around by any chance? What's her name? Victoria?
I'm not sure if she is. I'm not sure if she is.
But like,
but I was suspicious of her. Go ahead.
And also, you were suspicious of his second wife, who was on Hogan's Hero with him, that Olsen lady.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, she was another one, but you can't. There's not enough proof that she was there that night. She had been there a few days before, but I don't know. Like I said, I believe a woman was there in that apartment when Bob was killed. Because I don't think he would let anyone else but a female in. I think a woman was there. She may have been the one to kill Bob, or may have been involved just in his death.
Wow.
But I think the woman had to have been there. Had to have been.
Along with a male or with a man that helped do the job, or
I think so. I think so. I think it may have been a double, because somebody had to take that, whatever the murder weapon was, out. Not only that, but also get what was in the bag. So I assume it's more than one person. What are you going to do? Take more than one trip?
Man,
so I think it was more than one person.
Yeah, that's him and his second wife buried side by side. She had his body removed from his original burial location to where he is currently at now, and she's buried next to him. But people suspected her, like you said, or something about her, huh? But that's how you're supposed to do, like in these cases, right?
It was not a very good relationship. It was a very bitter divorce, very violent at times.
They say they reconciled.
Bob wasn't violent, she was.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Allegedly, she stated that they reconciled right before he died, but all the money, all his was up to her in the estate, accordingly, and people are upset in the family about it.
She reconciled getting his money in the estate. That's what she reconciled with.
Wow. Financial
end of it.
Well, I gotta ask you this, because I know I'm gonna have to have you back on the show. I already know that now, but I mean, this is crazy, man. I thank you for being on the show. I really enjoyed this. But I got to ask you about, speaking of wives, because like normally in these type of cases, you suspect the spouse or somebody closest to the victim in these cases. Yep. So they had tunnel vision. These folks did a poor job. The police did of investigating it. But most murders go unsolved anyway, though. That's the thing.
I think the general investigation had flaws to it. I think the crime scene was muddy. They allowed Victoria Berry, who was the actress who was in Hogan's Heroes, who had discovered the body, who had knocked on the door and then opened it. It was open. They allowed her back in, and she answered the phone, in fact, when Carpenter not only called, John Carpenter called, but Bob Jr. called as well.
Okay.
He called, and so I'm not an expert on forensics. My expert, even in looking at these crime scenes, I don't pretend to be an expert in forensics, but oh my goodness, this is just messed up. I mean, even for the 70s and the forensic, I believe that Dr. Karnitsky, who was the coroner or the examiner, actually did a bit of an examination there on the spot. Said, let's shave him, shave his head, shave the hair on his head, and let's look at what happened.
Wow.
I mean, I'm like, they didn't just take it all away and put him in it, put him on his table and examine him and look at him. And they started right then and there. I think you also had an investigator who gave away some details, like I think a coroner's investigator or something like that. And he talked to the media and he gave away some details. I mean, this case, any decent defense attorney would have been able to get Carpenter off. I think back then, even a hack defense attorney would have been able to get Carpenter off. No doubt in my mind. Just no doubt.
It's just like a really tragic episode from Hogan's Heroes, I guess. I don't know. It just the season, the series finale for real. That's what it sounds like, unfortunately. But I gotta ask you before we get out of here, man. I just really thank you for your time, man. Just sharing with us, man. Cause I gotta, you just open a Pandora's box as far as I'm concerned, with all this stuff out here. And I'm sure that you're gonna be in demand, not only as a person on people's show, but also as a writer after this. Hopefully, you get some gigs.
We'll see. I hope. I've kind of been busy going from gig. I've been just going from booking to booking, so I haven't been able to kind of try to line up projects thus far with the old-fashioned cold calling and emailing. But I've been kind of busy going from gig to gig and show to show. So that's been busy. And but yeah, we'll see. We'll absolutely see this. So far, the media tour aspect of it has been successful in terms of bookings. I've been doing show after show after show. So.
I mean, you're very interesting, dude. You're very knowledgeable, and you tell you're very passionate about your craft. And I got to ask you about one more Sam Cooke story. I know one more Sam Cooke question. Okay. Excuse me.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah. Well, his wife, why was she not considered?
Barbara.
Do you think she'd be suspect in his death? Should she be
I
considered?
was asked. I think I was asked this on another show, Barbara.
Mhm.
I know people are very suspicious of her, especially after the fact that she went to the funeral. I forget if it was Chicago or Los Angeles with Bobby Womack, was a friend of Sam's.
Like,
She got involved.
like his little brother, basically. I mean, that was his protege, Bobby Womack.
Yeah, because he had signed him up to his management company. So there was, I think people looked at her rather suspiciously, and for good reason. And as a suspect, when it comes to this, well, I don't think she was personally involved in terms of killing him. Like, I don't think she personally killed him. I would rule her out as the actual shooter or the actual person. She may have had some knowledge of what went on. I can't really say, but this strikes me as something that's organized.
Okay.
And so I don't see her directly like running the show. I think it was done for other reasons. And I think, like I said, my thesis is that two people were involved. You had two people involved, and in my view, this was a setup. You had two people involved. One got the ladies, Elisa Boyer and Bertha Franklin, involved, or forced them to get involved, and came up with the story. And the other was the one who beat up Sam and shot him. So I think it was at least two people.
Do you think he was beat up somewhere else and shot somewhere else and brought to the hotel or motel, whatever it is?
No doubt in my mind.
Okay.
Because I'm not aware of any blood in the hotel, in the office. I'm not aware of any other evidence that would suggest that he was actually shot there. I mean, I guess they found a bullet, but the fact that he was naked, save for a what would it be? Save for a
sports jacket and
a jacket, and I think a shoe or something like that. That suggests to me they transported him. I think they took him over there. And they wanted him in that office. For whatever reason, they needed him. They needed him to be found in the office. And one of the things I point out to, they could have just left him in a hotel room and had him be found there. But no, they wanted him in that office. They wanted to be found nude except for the jacket in that office. It was as if whoever arranged this, whoever set this up, they wanted Sam seen in a certain light.
Right.
They wanted to destroy his reputation. Very clear to me. Absolutely clear.
Now, did Elisa Boyer, she said she escaped the hotel or motel room, and did she go out the door or did she go out the window? I mean, what is her story on that?
She couldn't go out the window. I guess she grabbed the clothes and went out the door.
Okay.
Because she said Sam went into the bathroom. Again, that which makes no sense.
Dude,
right.
Wait, like, is Barbara Cook still alive to your knowledge? Have you reached out to her or anybody in her family?
No.
So you were like, I know Elisa Boyer lives in Hawaii, allegedly, according to that documentary.
I've heard that. I haven't talked to her. I know that the documentary "Lady Who Shot Me," which is on YouTube, I think they had an private investigator, find her and asked her about it, and it was kind of dispensed with in a cursory way in that documentary, but apparently they didn't get much out of her. She said she stuck to her story.
Yeah, I saw that. I think that was kind of, I don't know, a cop out to me. They could let her, no, I don't give a damn. Like, they let Joe Biden speak at these press conferences. They just don't let, you know what I'm saying? They cut him off at one point, but I think they should have just went ahead and played what she said in response, because they showed her, I guess somebody supposed to be Elisa Boyer in that documentary. And I think people need to do their research thoroughly. Don't take these movies or these documentaries as the final word or anything. Still remain a critical and free thinker and do your researching and go deep diving. And you never know. I mean, it's crazy. I know it's like, you can get obsessed with these things, like, trying to follow out who was the Zodiac killer and all this stuff. It's some rabbit holes you got to go down. Because even with the Bobby Fuller thing, theory, I heard that he was doing them acid parties back in the day. The LSD was created by the government.
Yeah, that was one aspect.
They had some acid parties.
That came up.
Yeah.
Right.
He might have just
that came up.
out too hard, and they said they panic or something. I don't know. But we got to talk
That's
about
the story.
Bobby Fuller on the next show. We definitely got to talk about that.
Yeah.
And Robert Blake. And I mean, it's so much stuff. Like, you know, you said my DB Cooper, this is the 50th year anniversary in November of this year. And you just know so much stuff, man. Really, you just you know, I wish you well in your journey, man. I thank you for being very tenacious and not giving up on the platform. And seeking me out. I appreciate that. I'm really
thank you.
How can people book you or support you? Like, can you tell us how we can book you and support what you do?
Well, if you want to contact me, you can contact me at Critic Incorporated on Twitter. That's at Critic Incorporated at Twitter. I'm on Facebook, Albert Lanier. I also have another Facebook page which just does my like booking, like I put up all my appearances and stuff like that and film stuff. So that's Al Lanier, but Albert Lanier on Facebook. And my blog is what would be medium.com at the Dr. 50. That's my blog, medium.com at the Dr. 50. So best way to contact me would be on Twitter at Critic Incorporated and on Facebook.
Now you said Critic.
I'm on Instagram. I am technically on Instagram. Good, sorry.
Yo, it's like Critic. I want to know what y'all find on Twitter is Critic Inc. I know you said Critic Incorporated, but you got Critic Inc. at the end instead.
Critic Inc. That's true. Yeah, Critic Inc. At Critic Inc. I always forget. I never say it that way, but at Critic Inc. Correct.
Yeah,
on Twitter.
All together. Yeah. So I mean, you on? And what's your Instagram?
My Instagram, I believe, is the Al Show.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to find that.
The Al Show.
I'll definitely be
so. And I never mentioned my Instagram much because I'm barely on there, but the Instagram's the Al Show. So, yeah, you know, if you want to contact me, Twitter and Facebook, and that's the best. And it's and so it's again kind of busy, going from show to show to show. I gotta try to line up some projects at this point, and hopefully this will pay off.
I don't know. You're very interesting. Somebody said, "Don't ask him about Dr. Umar Johnson." That might be another show.
Well, that's the only reason that I'm known on YouTube. That's why I'm known on YouTube. I wasn't known on YouTube before, but I'm known for that because I wrote an expose of Umar Johnson back in July of last year, and I did an interview on a show called "Let Me See Your Transcripts" in December. So that's the only reason I'm known. So I was wondering if somebody was going to say that.
Yeah, they said in the chat. It's about somebody want to know from your perspective, why hasn't there been a actual Sam Cooke biopic or biopic made at this point about his life? Why you think that hasn't been done?
Yeah, I never thought about that because I'm more interested in his death and his business dealings. So in terms of the guy and his life, that's not really much of interest to me. But in regards to his biopic, yeah, I guess I don't. That's a good question. You would think it would be perfect for a biopic.
Yeah, he still got fans around.
I think it would be perfect for a movie, for a what is that, movie of the week, or on some cable station, or even some theatrical released feature film.
Well, it's different now. They go on Hulu and Netflix now. I mean, you got Coming to America 2 coming out tomorrow. Well, have you seen the United States versus Billie Holiday? Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. I've heard about it though.
Messiah? Have you seen the Judas and the Black Messiah?
I've heard of it. Yeah, I haven't. I don't watch movies as much now that I'm no longer a critic, but or a reviewer, I should say. But yeah, that's been getting some talk. I think both those films have been getting a good deal of talk. Especially the Judas and the Messiah.
Yeah. But you know what? I tell people, man, the best way to treat these Hollywood movies, especially talk about our history or our stories, do not go in there with high expectations for them to tell the actual truth about our stories. So you will never be disappointed if you never have any expectation with these movies. And when you do that, a lot of times you end up presently surprised about what they do get right. You know, so I don't have any expectation. Like when Malcolm X, Spike Lee has done a psych job, a psyop on the black people for generations with Malcolm X. It needs to be redone because he left so much stuff out there that should be, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think Ozzie Davis did it best when he said that Spike should come back in 20 years and do another movie about Malcolm X from a different perspective. Because, you know, you'd be better off reading his autobiography, which has also been compromised by Alex Haley. But there's other things you should do your own research. I interviewed folks who are members of Malcolm's family and made that available on my platform. There's so many different ways to look at these things. It's like you got YouTube now. Go listen to Billie Holiday speak in her own way. You know, listen to Billie Holiday talk about Billie Holiday. Listen to Fred Hampton do his thing, not an actor. And then do the research. And now I reached out to Fred Hampton's mom over 10 years ago. And people don't realize until that movie came out that Fred Hampton's mom used to babysit Emmett Till. They used to be neighbors. So I had a chance to thank his mom, Iberia Hampton, before she passed away. She passed away back in 2016. Had a chance to interview his brother, who is his brother's keeper. He makes sure that people remember his brother, started a scholarship fund in honor of his brother. Interviewed lawyers that worked with Fred Hampton that was inspired to start the People's Law Office. So my thing is, you know, like I hate with these movies when they wait for everybody to die so nobody can be there and say, no, that's not how it went down. You know, they're waiting for people to die because people still like, you know, people in his family, Sam Cooke family, they just lost L.C. Cooke not too long ago. But you got folks, I mean, it's just sad to me that Sam got done this way, man. But you know what's crazy, that even though he died the way he died, it has not tarnished his legacy or his reputation. You know, but if he had died today, it's a different story. In those circumstances.
It's interesting because I think the death is too murky, too suspicious, and there's not enough evidence to conclusively prove Elisa Boyer's story and Bertha Franklin. And so it's up in the air. It's still up in the air. People just are suspicious of it. And so I think that's kind of helped Sam's reputation because Sam has been able to be known for his music and be known for his business acumen. And the death has been seen as a kind of odd, strange final chapter that people don't understand and that doesn't add up. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but you know, like I said with Sam, it's like people in a circle die crazy deaths. It's like his first wife died suspicious to me. That one car accident, how she died, and she was a beautiful woman too. I mean, Sam, like he was cursed or something from the get-go. It's like, you know, that real bad car accident in Arkansas where I believe the driver of the car got decapitated and had to send Sam to the hospital and whatnot. I mean, it's just a lot of stuff that happened to him. He had a lot of hard, tough luck. His son Vincent dying and drowning in the family swimming pool. I think he died. That put a schism between him and his wife Barbara towards the end.
Yeah, the personal side, you know, Sam had suffered tragedy in his life.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the end of his life was tragic. So,
of course. But I actually did. Somebody want to know. I'll let you go. I know you probably tired of all the Sam Cooke questions, but your take on his portrayal by Leslie Odom Jr., I believe, in One Night in Miami. What do you think about the portrayal of Sam?
Unfortunately, I haven't seen the movie. I never saw the movie, so I don't have an opinion about his portrayal.
Well, at least you're honest about it. You must didn't like looking at movies as a film critic. You must have hated it or something. You don't like movies?
I liked it just fine. I enjoyed it, but you know, I was covering film festivals, and so I stopped doing after attending film festivals for I don't know how many years, 15 years or whatever in Hawaii and elsewhere. I had to stop. You know, I stopped reviewing in about 2010 because it was just getting tiring doing, you know, covering film festivals. I had to cover other work. I had to do other work, other freelance work, and it was getting exhausting. So I had to quit. So
it's like
so
I hear you. Okay.
Yeah. So now I analyze films. So because I did an analysis of Mulholland Drive, David Lynch's film, earlier this month on Crooked Table Podcasts, and I think I had done Eyes Wide Shut a couple of years ago on that same podcast, Kubrick's film. So yeah, now I analyze films, and hopefully I'll do more of those, more of that in terms of media. So
Okay, well, it's cool. We'll be looking out for your, work coming down the pipe and stuff like that. And I wish you
yeah.
amplified blessings and success on a reinvigorated career.
And thank you very much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate this, man. Like I said, I enjoyed your, recent, turns on people's shows and stuff like that. I said, this guy's very knowledgeable and he provokes thought in people. And I just want to encourage people listening to this show and who will listen in the future, please do your research and think for yourself. Don't look at this as like the oracle for what is right and wrong and what should be history and what should be thought of as, true. Just research and be willing to think for yourself.
Sounds like good advice to me.
Yeah, but you get punished for that. We living in a weird time, man. This cancel culture stuff got to come to an end. Man, it's weird. But everything has its expiration date, so we'll see. Well, thank you, man, brother Albert, so much for taking time out to. And we will have you back on. I hope you be back on soon.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And I want to thank everybody for listening. It's very I'm glad to be of service to the people. Like I said, it'd be so many people trying to hit me up to be on the show. And brother Albert has been so tenacious and been seeing his good work, around recently. People say he's making the rounds. Well, we all be in it to win it. We got to start really creating the outlets and the spaces to tell our stories. You know what I'm saying? We got to amplify these stories. Like I enjoyed the Billie Holiday, the United States versus Billie Holiday movie. And Andra Day definitely did her thing. It's Lee Daniels. And it's problematic. He put his style on it, and Susie Laurie Parks. Okay. My thing is they could have, the story about Billie Holiday and Lester Young needs to be told. It needs to be told. I mean, Lester Young, did I say Larry Young? I mean, Lester Young, Prez, has been shortchanged in the telling the Billie Holiday story. And Lester Young is interested because, he died in March of 59 and Billie died months later, July of 59. But with Lester Young, what's incredible about him? 2 of his children got PhDs in education. His son, Lester Young Jr., is the top educator in the state of New York. I believe he's the chancellor over the region, the education. He's responsible for the public educational policy of all the children who go to public schools in New York State. That's Lester Young's son, Prez, who died way too soon at 49, in Alvin Hotel across the street from Birdland up in New York. He produced children who got PhDs in education, and he was one of the greatest saxophonists and musicians. Not only that, really cultural icons of the 20th century. This man not only reinvented saxophone language, he also reinvented language. He's the cat that's responsible for coining the phrase bread to mean money. Cool. I mean, this guy is interesting. The guy, my thing is, it would have been nice to see Billie Holiday played by Jill Scott, Jilly from Philly. I think she could have played Billie Holiday great. Billie Holiday, it was a little bit bigger when she was younger. And I think Terrence Howard did a great job as Lester Young, as Prez. Lester Young was red, had reddish hair, had green eyes. If they had picked them 15 years ago, I think it would have been great. But anyway, like I said, I think most definitely would have been a great Fred Hampton. That's just me. But please don't let Hollywood dictate how we should receive our heroes and sheroes, how we should, uplift them. I think it's very important. And I'll do my review on the United States versus Billie Holiday. I'll have my take on it. But really, I want to encourage you all out there who's listening to the sound of my voice. Tell our stories. I don't care how you tell them. If you got to do a TikTok video, do YouTube, use your smartphone, tell your story. Don't wait for these people with all this money and wait for everybody who knew these people die. Then they want to tell the story the way they want to tell it. Because the United States versus Billie Holiday, the performance was great from Andra Day, but I think the script could have been a lot better. It could have been focused on a lot of other things besides what they focus on. And that's just my opinion on it right now. But I'm not, even with the Judas and the Black Messiah, I just think that we got too many things right now we could utilize to tell our stories, not wait for Hollywood to tell us, get a story of ours every 15, 20 years and then get it wrong at the end of the day. And I want to encourage y'all, I'm gonna get out there. Go on YouTube and listen to Billie Holiday in her own words, not just her singing, but the interviews. She left behind some interviews. And there's an interview that Lester Young did, I believe, in France before he died, before he came back to the States to die. It's like, it's Breakfast Club worthy. Y'all like all that Soldier Boy and Put Respect on My Name, Birdland. He did that type of interview back in 59 before he died. So let me read a disclaimer and I'm out of here. Thank y'all once again for being patient and for working with Brother Ron. And yeah, Albert Lanier, he's been trying for over a year to get on my show. I know a lot of people be reaching out to me, and I apologize. I don't return the phone calls or the text messages and all this stuff. I mean, I be going through a lot of, it's not important. Everybody going through stuff, but I just got a lot of things I'm trying to get through. And but that's life. But thank y'all for encouraging me to keep on doing these shows and for your support. A lot of things and majority of my support comes from Black people. It comes from the community. So I know that I'm doing a service for Black people out there, and it makes me feel good. Because if you want to serve Black people, you got to love us, man. Because we hard, man. I could tell you some of the stories this year long, how I've been done wrong, been character assassinated by Black people, but it is what it is, come with the territory. So let me read a disclaimer. The views expressed by hosts and guests on the We All Be TV platform are not the official views, opinions, beliefs, or perspectives of We All Be News or the We All Be Group Incorporated. We All Be News is an organization that thoroughly believes in supplementing the information narrative that is usually supplied by the corporate news entities with those viewpoints and expressions which may be marginalized or ignored for a plethora of reasons. We are about informing the general public on alternative perspectives as it relates to news and information, and letting the general public be the ultimate judge in deciding on how to use said information. Informed citizens are responsible citizens. Thank you for your support. Thank y'all, family. Y'all can support us. Cash App, $R2C2H2. You can Google Pay, PayPal, Zelle it at r2c2h2@gmail.com. You can also buy Art of His Art. Yeah, this is all my art. If you said, who did this art? I did this art. It's all my art. And I also got my art on t-shirts. Yep, that's Muhammad, the greatest. Go to Teespring. Down there below the description box, there's the Teespring shelf to access it quickly. Excuse me. Also, you go to r2c2h2.com. I'll be uploading more designs of my shirts and also images. Man, I'm very prolific, man. I got like notebooks and sketchbooks and this garage full of art. And I'm gonna be one of them people probably that, you be lucky to get one of my original pieces of art. It's gonna be worth a lot of Bitcoin one day. Like Brother Ron, it's weird, 100 years from now, people, this is Brother Ron original. Yeah, the artist. Yeah, we got his horns over here in the Smithsonian. So it is what it is. That's how life works. It's funny like that. But anyway, thank you, beautiful hour. Thank you so much. Thank you, beautiful people out here I serve. But we'll be back on this weekend. I have some shows coming up. And thank y'all so much for taking the time out your busy schedule. Yeah, I had a couple of cases I wanted to talk about tonight. We'll be on, I want to talk about the Robert Blake thing and talk about some other cases. DB Cooper. I thought I ain't know we're gonna spend this much time on Sam Cooke or Bob Crane, but I'm glad y'all tune in and y'all do your own research on that. It's very fascinating because there's a lot of things I didn't know about the Bob Crane case until I started doing research today. I was like, wow, this is interesting stuff. Well, I'm gonna tell you like this. Y'all do the research on that. Even Elijah Muhammad's son, he was on a show with Farrakhan back in the day. And he talked about that. He talked about the save the guy the Fard guy, who he really was. And it's not for me to say. I just think that I don't really debate people about their religious beliefs and stuff like that. It does not my lane, because when you believe something versus knowing something, it's two different things to know and to believe. Two different things. I know that 2 + 2 is 4. But if you believe it's 5, I can't convince you otherwise. See how it works? So it's very important to be critical, to be open, to be free thinking, and love freedom of thought and freedom of expression. And my thing is this, like, people ask me a lot of times, who do you listen to on a regular? I don't listen to a lot of people on a regular. I listen to myself. I'm learning how to listen more to myself now, to be more intuitive and be more understanding of me, myself, and I think more people need to start listening to themselves, to trying to find this so-called Messiah. We all got the Messiah gene. You understand? We all got the Messiah gene. You are the Messiah that you've been waiting for. Save yourself. And with that said, thank y'all. Good night. God bless. We'll talk about Minister Farrakhan and Nation of Islam all day and another day. But I would tell you this. Y'all are running the fool's errand if you think our government was not complicit in killing our leaders. They owe us reparations because they deny us self-determination. Just on that alone. And that's why I tell people, do the research, show the receipts. The FBI was involved in killing Fred Hampton, Malcolm X, and Dr. Martin Luther King, or Michael King, whatever his name is. But, they were involved. So for y'all to sit here and say, well, there's some Negroes, what's said about Black people is that, yes, we are complicit, but our problem is we don't love ourselves more than we love our oppressors. We love our oppressors more than we love ourselves as a people. And so when you don't recognize the power that you have to free yourself, you will also use that same power to enslave yourself. When you don't understand how to self-love, you produce self-hate. So instead of freeing yourself with the power that you have, that the enemy knows you have this power, this universal power, this spiritual power, but you use it to undermine yourself because you want to be just like them. You want to say, we got to work hard. Just like the white man don't work harder than you. You built the country. You gave it the cultural identity. They didn't do that. We did that. We do everything for everybody, but we don't put ourselves first. And when you are people that don't put yourself first, you will always be last. Not only in the minds of your oppressors and enemies, but in the mind of your own self. To thy own self be true. Okay, so thank y'all once again. God bless. We have more shows on this stuff, but I'm not buying, they work together. No, man. You in a system that disrespects your humanity. This is what you get. Like, people talking about, well, the 3/5 compromise was not about Black people being 3/5 human. It's about some legalities. Okay, that's true. But at the same time, you got the spirit of lacking your respect and acceptance of your full humanity, and you begging folks that don't respect you as a full human being to respect you as such. You keep on begging them instead of reclaiming that for yourself and say, I don't need your crappy value system to tell me I'm not worth a damn thing, because I know I'm worth something, because I'm bigger than your damn system. You deserve the fate that you have. When you say stuff, say, Sam Cooke, he was, he got too big for his britches, you're too aggressive. They are aggressive. That's the language that they speak. The mistake that we make is that we come in peace when they was raised in war. They never come in peace. They know the aliens and stuff are real. That's why they got all these guns and weaponry. Because there ain't nobody coming in peace to conquer worlds. You don't come in peace to conquer people, to bully them, to take over their resources. There ain't nothing peaceful about that. So we live in a fantasy world. And what y'all need to do, I'm writing the process. I might start a book club. Read Robert F. Williams' Negroes with Guns. You got folks, even the white man did not respect Dr. King's tactics. Not only was it counter-revolutionary, it's also against the good understanding that self-preservation is the number one law in nature. You don't love your enemy more than you love yourself. It's a fool's errand, and you get fool's results. So anyway, I'm gonna get off here now. Y'all take it easy. Well, aliens, anything that you don't look. Harry Truman said that the only thing new is the history you don't know. There's a lot of things we don't know, that we're ignorant to, whether it be willful ignorance or it's like, they dumbing us down. There's a lot of things they're not telling us about the world that we live in, the so-called world that we live in. It's a lot of things. See, a lot of y'all just happy, with looking at sports and stuff, but you haven't figured out how to win at the game of life. The game of life is more important than the NBA or NFL or any movie coming out on Hulu or Netflix or whatever. The game of life. We have not figured out how to win at the game of life. You could be the biggest loser in life and still win big. You understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? So we have a golden opportunity where we could change the narrative. We can create the narrative, but you got to be the change that you see. You got to be the director of your movie. You got to catch yourself as the lead in your movie. Your life is your movie. It's your choice. And, you know, I'm just tired of people. I mean, like, and another thing, this is a luxury. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to do this. You know, I bring on Judge Joe Brown and other people like that. That's fine. You know, that's cool. But I would hope, especially some of you grown people out there, that you don't need to always hear from other folks to live your life. Live your life. Don't have to wait on every word of a person say. I mean, don't treat people like we like the oracles or something. You are the oracle. You speak life and death on a daily basis. Your words create worlds. You don't need nobody to tell you what to do. You need to tell yourself what to do. Stop waiting for somebody to lead you. Lead yourself. Okay, I'm through. All right, God bless. Power to the people, baby. We'll be back on. We all be in it.